Chapter 1044. The Great Sword Maiden grafting technique is a good thing. It allows the wielder to break through the limit of the sword maidens they have and obtain an additional one. Ying Zheng looked at Guhan and smiled. Guhan, if you want, I can teach you this technique for free. After all, we are good friends. Forget it. I'm not interested. Guhan said calmly. That's a pity. Ying Zheng shrugged. I spent a lot of effort to get it from Fleeting Calendar. I didn't expect you to look down on it. Kunzu. Guhan looked at Liuanian Ling in confusion. Does Kunzu also know the Great Sword Maiden grafting technique? Yes. Liuanian Ling nodded. I've seen it in the internal information. Our ancestor indeed knows the Great Sword Maiden grafting technique. However, he warned his descendants that the Great Sword Maiden grafting technique is a very evil technique that must never be spread out. That's why he didn't teach it to his descendants. I've always thought that the Great Sword Maiden grafting technique had completely disappeared. I didn't expect it to still be circulating. To be honest, the Great Sword Maiden grafting technique created by Kunzu isn't that great. Not only can it not leave a deep mark, but it also sometimes doesn't listen to commands and likes to make things difficult for me. Ying Zheng shook his head helplessly and said, thanks to my great talent, I've slightly modified this grafting sword maiden grand magic, and with that, I can have a sword maiden who is as obedient as you, and looks like a real human being. It is extremely convenient. So, Jiyu Han, are you sure you don't want to learn the modified grafting sword maiden grand magic? There's no need for that. Jiyu Han rejected Ying Zheng once again, leaving a look of pity on Ying Zheng's face. Then what's with these Qing dynasty emperors? Why did they appear here as a group? Don't tell me it's just a coincidence. Guhan pointed at the Qing dynasty emperors who were still trapped by Ying Zheng. They are just the sacrificial offerings used by those great magi for their resurrection. Ying Zheng spread his arms and said, You've also noticed that the resurrection time of these great magi is much shorter than before, right? That's because they forcefully squeezed the power of Zhu Wu's blood essence to speed up their own resurrection. What does the power that squeezed out Zhu Wu's blood have to do with the emperors of the Qing dynasty? Liuanian Ling asked in confusion. Miss Ling, why do you think these great wizards hid Zhu Wu's blood essence in this underground palace? Was it just because this place was very secretive? You may not know this, but other than Nahachi and Huang Taiji's tombs, which are indeed in Shanhai Pass, all the other tombs are actually in the pass, which is the area near the old Yangjing city. Before the Zhu Wus were sealed by the Ju Tian Star Battle Formation, they forcibly moved those tombs to Shanhai Pass with a great magical power, so that they could store a drop of their Zhu Wu's blood essence in the corpses of these emperors. Because only the corpses that have been stained with the fate of the human emperor and are the descendants of the Wu people can ensure that Zhu Wu's blood essence can be preserved for a long time, and its power will not gradually dissipate over time. Apart from the emperors of the Qing dynasty, no other dynasty under the heaven can gather together 12 emperors who have the blood of the Wu people. My great Qin can't even gather one, because until now, I still haven't found the tombs of my poor son, Hu Hai, and my grandson, Ziying. Perhaps their bones have been burned to ashes by that guy, Xiong Yu. When talking about his son and grandson, Ying Zheng did not show any sad emotion. Obviously, the past 3,000 years had almost worn away his familial ties. And if you want to speed up the resurrection of the Grand Magus with Zhu Wu's blood essence, the best way is, of course, to sacrifice the souls of the Wu people's human emperor, who nurtured this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, to Zhu Wu's blood essence. Ying Zheng looked at the emperors of the Qing dynasty, his face filled with endless mockery. They are nothing but sacrificial offerings summoned from another dimension through a mystic technique. Originally, Zhou planned to bring these emperors here after noon today, and then sacrifice them to Zhu Wu's blood essence. But, you came one step earlier, and killed Zhou instead, depriving these grand magi who were sacrificed to the emperors of the Qing dynasty. That's why they were lucky enough to survive. That's why Xingtian and the other 10 grand magi risked their lives to send Zhou away from the Taiyin garrison, Guhan said thoughtfully. No wonder the grand magi had to find a way to send a grand magus away. It turned out that they wanted to protect a grand magus who could help them resurrect earlier. It seems you're the one who told the Wu people this method. Gu Han stared coldly at Ying Zheng and said, "Otherwise, why didn't the Wu people use this method to speed up the resurrection of the Grand Magi in the past 100 years? I had no choice. In order to win their trust, these things had to be done. It took me several hundred years to come up with this method." When Ying Zheng finished speaking, the net that trapped the emperors of the Qing dynasty suddenly emitted a flash of golden lightning. In an instant, the emperors who were still struggling in the net were turned into a pile of charcoal and died in the net. After that, a dimensional vortex appeared and sent the corpses of the emperors back. "All right, it's time for me to go. I still need to go to Chang'e and take the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence away." After that, Ying Zheng walked toward the blood formation on the wall. "Wait, did you forget something?" Gu Han stopped Ying Zheng again. "Where's the solid black tortoise? You promised me that you would tell me about it. Have you forgotten?" "Aya, I've never said that I must tell you. I think it's better to keep this secret in my heart. I'll come back and make another deal with you when I need your help one day," Ying Zheng replied with a smile on his face. "Then I'll make a new deal with you right now." Of course, Gu Han would not let Ying Zheng use the solid black tortoise to lure him. Therefore, Gu Han decided to take the initiative and make a new deal with Ying Zheng. "Oh, what are you going to use to make a deal with me?" Ying Zheng asked with interest. "Ling and I promised to keep what happened today a secret forever. What do you think?" Gu Han put forward a proposal that Ying Zheng could not refuse. "If you are willing to, you will still be the sword-bearer Yaoguang. Today, I saved you from the land of Zhu Wu, and I destroyed all Zhu Wu's blood essence. From now on, there will be no more Zhu Wu's blood essence in this world. You can still be your Yaoguang freely. Or, from today onwards, you can be your Ying Zheng openly. I'll tell the Sword Commission headquarters that I've fallen into a tough battle with the Grand Magi in the land of Zhu Wu. It was you, Ying Zheng, who helped me at the last moment and killed all the Grand Magi. The only traitor of humanity is Yi Fan. You came to this Shanhai Pass just to find Zhu Wu's blood essence, so that you can protect humanity forever after you become Zhu Wu. I believe that as long as you tell me this, humanity will take the initiative to admit that you are a real human being, Ying Zheng, the first emperor of Qin. After you become Zhu Wu, you will be the strongest force of the new generation that can rival Zhendi. You can even ascend to the throne in any base city and become the third emperor of humanity. From then on, you will be one of the highest leaders of humanity. With that, it will be much easier for you to become the human emperor again, and you will be able to avoid many detours. What do you think? Isn't this a good deal?" This. Ying Zheng fell into a deep thought. He had to admit that Gu Han's words had indeed moved him, and he was deeply attracted by the conditions Gu Han mentioned. "But doesn't this mean that you have a handle on me?" Ying Zheng snorted coldly. "Even if you help me today, you can still expose what happened today to the world at any time in the future. If that happens, won't I be controlled by you? Besides, Gu Han is not the only one here today. There is also the young lady of the Liu Nian family here. What should I do if she exposes me? There's no one in this world who dares to not believe a word she says. With your Majesty's capabilities, as long as you make great contributions to humanity, no one will dare to doubt you. Even if I expose what happened today in the future, in the face of your Majesty's great contributions, what does this little mistake amount to?" Gu Han said coolly. "Humans are profit-seeking animals. As long as something is beneficial to them, they will look down on its harm. As long as your Majesty is still fighting for humanity, I believe that humans will not take such a small matter to heart. Besides, your Majesty has never really killed any human with your own hands, have you?" What Jiyu Han said was right. As long as Ying Zheng could win the trust of the humans in the early stages, and make great contributions to the human race, then even if today's incident was exposed, it would not have too much of an impact. For example, after Liu Bang became the emperor, would anyone still care about the shameless things he did when he was still a hoodlum? Would anyone still care about the fact that he had deceived Empress Liu and her family to get their support? No one would care about that. They only knew that Ying Zheng's power could protect them. With that, Ying Zheng's position would be as stable as Mount Tai. However, in order to achieve the desired result, The most important thing was to win the trust of the human beings in the early stage. Otherwise, once the Sword Commission judged that Ying Zheng was harboring some unfathomable intention, no matter how many meritorious deeds Ying Zheng had done for the human beings would still suspect that he was harboring some ulterior motive, and if that happened, the human world would never truly accept Ying Zheng. Therefore, to achieve the desired outcome, Guhan had to help Ying Zheng conceal his true intentions. Get your little girlfriend to swear on the reputation of the Lionian family that you won't tell anyone about today's incident for the next 20 years. Then, I will tell you about the black tortoise, Ying Zheng finally said. As a result, everyone's eyes focused on Lionian Ling. Lionian Ling looked at Guhan awkwardly. She lowered her head and said, "No, I have to tell the truth about what happened today. This is the foundation of the Lionian family that has been passed down for thousands of years. How can I, Before Lionian Ling could finish, Guhan directly covered her mouth. That's right, he used his mouth to cover her mouth. Chapter 1045. Trust me. When Guhan sealed Lionian Ling's mouth with his own, he whispered to Lionian Ling at the same time, "This is a trap that I've dug for Ying Zheng. If this deal succeeds, I guarantee that Ying Zheng will swallow this bitter fruit sooner or later." Woo woo. Lionian Ling felt dizzy and her face was flushed. She could not even hear what Guhan was saying. She could only nod her head repeatedly to show that she agreed with Guhan's words. Thank you. Unexpectedly, not only did Guhan not let go after saying thank you, but he kissed her even more passionately. Hey, young man, be careful, there is an old man who is more than 3,000 years old here, Ying Zheng said in a very dissatisfied tone. Although Ying Zheng was once an emperor with a harem full of clouds, he was now a real single dog. How could he withstand such provocation? Immediately, he said in a very dissatisfied tone. Ling has agreed. Only then did Guhan reluctantly let go of her mouth. Ying Zheng hurriedly asked Lionian Ling for confirmation. After getting an affirmative guarantee from Lionian Ling, he finally nodded and said, "Very well, this deal is settled. Then tell me everything about Jiyu Xuanwu now. Do not hide anything." Guhan immediately said excitedly. Well said. Ying Zheng pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, "I guess you should be a descendant of Jiyu Xuanwu. That's why you can't wait to know the news about your ancestor. What's going on? How did Jiyu Xuanwu become your ancestor? Isn't she your sister?" After hearing Ying Zheng's words, Lionian Ling whispered to Guhan in surprise. Didn't Jiyu Xuanwu enter the door of truth and eternity? Guhan whispered in Lionian Ling's ear. She must have traveled to the past, and she just happened to meet Jiyu Xuanwu in the past. That's why Ying Zheng thought that Jiyu Xuanwu was my ancestor. Ying Zheng continued, "Your ancestor is really powerful. Back then, he and your girlfriend's ancestor, Fleeting Years, dominated the world side by side. Even Fleeting Years was no match for your ancestor in the early days. Before Fleeting Year Calendar became the Sword Emperor, he fought with Jiyu Xuanwu more than 10 times. Every time, Jiyu Xuanwu would beat him up. However, Fleeting Year Calendar was really tough. Even if he was beaten up more than 10 times, he would still fight with your ancestor. It was because of this spirit that Fleeting Year Calendar's swordsmanship became better and better. After Fleeting Year Calendar became the Sword Emperor, Jiyu Xuanwu was gradually unable to defeat him. The three of us used to be very good friends. Of course, I didn't use the name Ying Zheng. Instead, I called myself Xuanji. I believe you haven't forgotten this name, right? Ying Zheng said with a smile. The name Xuanji slightly surprised Guhan and Lionian Ling. Is the Xuanji you mentioned the old ancestor's old friend, Sword Immortal Xuanji, who went missing? Lionian Ling asked in surprise. That's right. I am that Sword Immortal Xuanji. Ying Zheng nodded. When the Great Destruction began, I was already 75 years old. When I met your old ancestor, I was already 85 years old. When your old ancestor became a Sword Immortal, I was almost 95 years old. With this art of immortality, I can only live up to 95 years old. At the 95th year of my life, I might show signs of wanting to return to my youth at any time. And when the signs appeared, I would have to find a coffin and bury myself in it. Ying Zheng put on a reminiscing expression. In the end, the signs appeared very suddenly. I didn't even have the time to bid farewell to all my friends. I had no choice but to bury myself in the ground immediately. And this lasted for a full 10 years. After my rebirth, I was only a 1-year-old baby. It was impossible for me to reconnect with the old friends from my previous life. Therefore, according to your records, Sword Immortal Xuanji had indeed gone missing. However, Jiyu Xuanwu was an exception. Because she was different from the others, I asked her to be my adoptive mother. The word adoptive mother made Guhan and Liuonian Ling's imagination run wild. After I was reborn from the coffin, I was just a baby who had lost all my strength. Someone had to dig me out from the coffin and raise me until I was 12 years old. Only then can I gradually regain my strength. The person who raised me will be known as my adoptive mother or adoptive father. Ying Zheng let out a long sigh. This person has to be someone I trust absolutely. Otherwise, if he has any evil thoughts, I'm afraid I'll have to rest forever in the ground. Every time I have to choose an adoptive father or a adoptive mother, it's always a headache for me. I can only spend several dozens of years observing a person, and only then can I know if he is truly worthy of being entrusted to me. Before the Great Destruction, I could still ask the Wu people to help me. After the Great Destruction, most of the Wu people have died, and I can only ask the humans for help. Fortunately, for the past 1,000 years, I didn't choose the wrong person, and I was saved every single time. And Jiyu Xuanwu was the first adoptive mother I chose after the Great Destruction. However, when I was saved by Jiyu Xuanwu, she wasn't in a good condition. She was being hunted by someone, not by Yuan Ku, but by the humans. Among the humans who were hunting her, there were even 2 invincible existences, Half-Day Jendi and High Saint Jendi. At that time, including Kunzu, there were only 5 Jendi among the humans, and 2 of them were hunting Jiyu Xuanwu. Jiyu Xuanwu was really unlucky. Therefore, even under such circumstances, she still thought of digging me out from my grave. I'm really grateful to her. When he said this, a grateful expression emerged on Ying Zheng's face. You're saying, the human Jendi is hunting Jiyu Xuanwu? Guhan asked in disbelief. Why? Why are the humans hunting her? What did she do? I don't know about that. Ying Zheng spread out his hands. I was only dug out by Jiyu Xuanwu. She was on the run, so she didn't have the time to take care of me. She could only temporarily place me on Mount Wudong, and let Heavenly Master Zhijing and a bunch of old Taoists take care of me. I lived on Mount Wudong for 18 years. Oh yes, you've played the Wudong Pinnacle Dungeon. You should know the environment there. It's so isolated that not even a sword-bearer from Yangjing City has been there. I couldn't find any news about Jiyu Xuanwu. Later, I grew up on Mount Wudong until I was 18 years old. I really couldn't stand staying on the mountain, so I changed my name to Daoist Tai'er and left Mount Wudong. After going through untold hardships, I finally returned to Yangjing City. After that, I never returned to Mount Wudong. When Mount Wudong suffered a calamity, I happened to be reborn for the second time. Later, I met with the descendants of Wudong a few times and found that they were living the lives of ordinary people. I didn't ask much about them and haven't contacted them for more than 700 years. Hearing this, Guhan sighed. He didn't expect Mount Wudong to have such a connection with Ying Zheng. But since Jiyu Xuanwu was willing to entrust Ying Zheng to Mount Wudong, it meant that Mount Wudong actually had a deep connection with Jiyu Xuanwu. It seemed that he had to find that little brat of Wudong and see if he had any information about Jiyu Xuanwu. When I returned to Yangjing City under the name of Daoist Tai'er to inquire about Jiyu Xuanwu, I found that all the news about Jiyu Xuanwu had disappeared, as if Jiyu Xuanwu didn't exist in this world. Although Jiyu Xuanwu's incarnation of Sword Immortal Black Tortoise is very low-key, and few ordinary people know the name Sword Immortal Black Tortoise. But among the sword-bearers, Sword Immortal Black Tortoise is very famous. The higher the rank of the sword-bearer, the clearer they know about Sword Immortal Black Tortoise. Back then, Sword Immortal Black Tortoise, Sword Immortal Grand Architect, and Sword Immortal Fleeting Time had done many earth-shattering things, and killed many Yuan Kus who had wreaked havoc in the world. These ordinary people may not know, but the sword-bearers do. I really couldn't understand how Sword Immortal Black Tortoise could just disappear without a trace. Later, I heard that Fleeting Time had gone crazy and started something called the Culture Apocalypse, destroying a lot of culture and history. Only then did I understand that Fleeting Time was the mastermind behind all this. It was Fleeting Time who started the Culture Apocalypse in order to hide all the news about Jiyu Xuanwu. Ying Zheng's revelation stunned Guhan and Liuyan Ling once again. Neither of them had expected that the real reason for the Culture Apocalypse was to hide the news about Jiyu Xuanwu. Guhan was fine. In fact, he already had some guesses in his mind. When he found out that the news about his ancestor had been deliberately erased, he guessed that it was the doing of some super powerful force, and he also guessed that it was the Fleeting Time clan. But Guhan really did not expect that it was Kunzu Fleeting Time Calendar who had directly given the order. The reason for the Culture Apocalypse, which caused the entire human society to lose all its culture and history to a terrifying extent, was actually to erase all the news about his ancestor. And this ancestor was not Guhan's ancestor, but Guhan's daughter. There were just too many twists and turns. Impossible. The Kunzu would never do such a thing. This is all a misunderstanding. It's because my ancestor believed that by erasing all culture and history, the Yuan coup would disappear. It's because of this that my ancestor mistakenly initiated the Culture Apocalypse. This has nothing to do with Jiyu Xuanwu. Liuyan Ling immediately shrieked in dissatisfaction. She would not allow Ying Zheng to slander her ancestor like this. Sigh. There are 1,000 Hamlets in 1,000 people's eyes. I'm only speaking my opinion. As for what you think, that's your own business. It has nothing to do with me. In any case, I believe that Fleeting Time Calendar initiated the Culture Apocalypse to erase everything about Jiyu Xuanwu. By the way, I'm sure you don't even know what Hamlet is, because the Culture Apocalypse has already erased Hamlet completely, Ying Zheng said in a mocking tone. This was how history was. When it was uncovered layer by those who experienced it, you would discover that history was actually a strange farce. Chapter 1046. Actually, I don't have any clear evidence to prove that the great cultural destruction was caused by the Black Tortoise. No ordinary person knows anything about the Black Tortoise, and the surviving swordbearers are all afraid to talk about it. Even with my methods, I can't force the swordbearers to tell the truth. It seems that some kind of restriction has been planted in their minds. This is a common method used by the demon race. It can completely seal off a person's memory. Even if you search the other person's soul, you won't be able to find the truth. So, all of this is just my speculation based on some clues. So, I don't have any evidence to prove the truth. You can just ignore what I said. I don't care. In fact, Guhan knew very well that even if Ying Zheng did not have any evidence, as long as Ying Zheng did not lie, there was a high chance that the great cultural destruction was caused by the Black Tortoise. Guhan could not help but recall what happened in the Radiant Amusement Park that day. It was Kunzu who forced the Black Tortoise into the Gate of Truth and Eternity. Obviously, Kunzu hoped that the Black Tortoise could return to the past. There must have been a lot of grudges between the Black Tortoise and Kunzu in the past that no one knew about. However, it seemed that Kunzu did not really hate the Black Tortoise. Otherwise, Kunzu would not have handed over the role of leveler to Guhan so calmly. Moreover, he would not have helped Guhan in the game, helping Guhan's swordsmanship to grow faster and reach a level that even Guhan could not imagine. If Ying Zheng had not threatened Guhan with the Ju Tian Star battle formation, Guhan would not have chosen to compromise with Ying Zheng. Unfortunately, when Guhan and Kunzu were together in the game, no matter how Guhan probed, Kunzu never revealed anything about him and the Black Tortoise. When Guhan left the game, Kunzu told Guhan that he would never meet Guhan in the game again. Their fate had ended. Therefore, it was impossible for Guhan to get the truth from Kunzu. Only Ying Zheng could reveal part of the truth. So, your fate with my ancestor ends here? Guhan asked expectantly. He was hoping that Ying Zheng could reveal more information about the Black Tortoise. I'm not sure about that. Ying Zheng wore a thoughtful expression. I remember it was my fourth resurrection after the Great Calamity, which happened about 400 years after the Great Calamity. It happened to be the most intense time of the Alps War. In order to protect the human race from being wiped out, I secretly lurked in the Alps mountains. I made up my mind that if the human race was in danger of being wiped out during the war, I would have to lend them a hand. I remember it was during the Battle of Matterhorn. At that time, the human race was facing the continuous attacks of 3 desolate-level Yuan Ku. Blood Huan Jendi and Jiuli Jendi, the mother and son, Jendi, could not hold them off at all. Blood Huan Jendi even broke his own immortal-level sword Maiden Immortal Slaying Sword. I even felt that the human race was on the brink of annihilation. Just when I was about to lend a hand, a mysterious man slashed down from the sky. With just one slash, the desolate-level Yuan Ku Virokana had his triflowers cut off. Virokana was so scared that he immediately fled back to Spirited Mountain. He hasn't recovered even until now, and is still hiding in Spirited Mountain to heal his wounds. Ying Zheng recounted an exciting scene that had been constantly embellished in many web novels, television dramas, and movies. In fact, just as Ying Zheng had said, the Battle of the Alps was unprecedentedly tragic. Almost half of the human swordbearers had died in the battle. Out of the 36 immortal-level swordbearers before the battle, only 9 were left after the battle. One of the Emperor swordbearers had died in the battle, and another had broken his own sword. Only Jiuli Jendi was left with his full combat power. If not for the fact that Yuan Ku had also sacrificed himself in the Battle of the Alps, the human race would have probably been annihilated. The Battle of Matterhorn was the most important battle in the Battle of the Alps. At that time, the humans had just been ambushed by Yuan Ku at the Great St. Bernard Mountain Pass. A total of 12 immortal-level swordbearers had died in the battle. In order to cover the retreat of the rest of the main human force, Holy Light Jendi had fought against 3 desolate-level Yuan Ku alone. In the end, he had died a heroic death. His blood had dyed the entire Great St. Bernard Mountain Pass gold. Even now, the Great St. Bernard Mountain Pass was still golden. After the ambush at the Great St. Bernard Mountain Pass, Yuan Ku had prepared to launch an all-out attack on the humans. Therefore, the Battle of Matterhorn Mountain Pass had begun. At that time, the humans had gathered the last of their strength and fought with the determination to die. Although no one was afraid of death, and the humans had fought very tenaciously, the difference in strength was still too great. Just as the Battle of Matterhorn Mountain Pass was about to end, a sword light suddenly flew from the sky. In a millionth of a second, it had hit the strongest of the 3 desolate-level Yuan Ku Virokana. He was a powerful Yuanko who was on equal footing with the Jade Emperor of the Heavenly Court. The Spirited Mountain that he belonged to had even suppressed the Heavenly Court for a time. However, because of this sword, Mahavirokana's head was directly chopped off. Although Virokana's head quickly grew back, Virokana's power began to drop drastically. He dropped from desolate-level Yuan Ku to universe-level Yuan Ku. He dropped a whole realm and 4 small realms. Since then, it was said that Virokana had been hiding in the Spirited Mountain and had never stepped out of it. Most of the Yuan Ku who belonged to the Spirited Mountain died in the Battle of the Alps, and the rest were annexed by the Heavenly Court. The Spirited Mountain only had Virokana and a few kittens and puppies left. It was considered to have completely declined and no longer appeared in the human world. At that time, Virokana didn't dare to fight anymore and directly fled back to the Spirited Mountain. Without Virokana, the human Jendi began to counterattack Yuan Ku. The remaining 2 desolate-level Yuan Ku struggled to resist Jendi's desperate attacks while guarding against the next sword energy that could appear at any time in the sky. Therefore, after fighting for a couple of hours, they chose to retreat and leave the battlefield at the same time. Without the protection of the desolate-level Yuan Ku, Jendi directly joined the battle against the other Yuan Ku levels. The result of the battle was obvious. Except for some universe-level and universe-level Yuan Ku who escaped by luck, the rest of the Yuan Ku almost all died in the Matterhorn. The Battle of the Alps Mountain suddenly ended, and the humans finally won a Pyrrhic victory. At this point, the humans had survived the first difficult sword era and flourished again after more than 100 years of development. Therefore, where did the sword energy that saved the entire Alps Mountain battle come from? Was it the sword bearer of the humans, Or was it the heavens who couldn't bear to see the destruction of the humans and sent down help? Humans debated this for a very long time. If the owner of the sword chi was a human, first of all, this human's strength was so terrifying that it was invincible. Just one strike was enough to make Mahavarokana fall to the level of universe-level Yuan Ku. This was no different from killing Mahavarokana. Killing a desolate-level Yuan Ku with one strike was something that Kanzu couldn't do at his peak. This meant that the owner of the sword chi had surpassed the level of an emperor sword wielder and reached a level that humans couldn't even imagine. Putting aside whether this kind of state existed or not, if the owner of this sword chi was really a human being, as long as the owner of this sword chi took action, it would not be a problem for humans to wipe out all the Yuan Kus in the world. It was only a matter of time before all the Yuan Kus were driven out of Earth and the Earth was back in the hands of humans. In that case, why did this human hide in the dark? Why didn't he help his compatriots? If this was a miracle sent by God to help humans. Come on, almost all the gods in myths and religious legends had turned into Yuan Ku and descended into this world. Jade Emperor, Mahavirokana, Jehovirokana. Other than Allah, almost all the gods of mainstream religions had appeared. Would there really be gods in this world who were willing to help humans? Even humans didn't believe this. Therefore, in the end, humans still didn't know who the owner of the sword chi was. They could only guess that it was a neutral party that didn't want to see humans perish but also didn't want to see Yuan Ku perish. However, this neutral party was different from the Freedom Metropolis. The Freedom Metropolis didn't participate in any disputes between humans and Yuan Ku, but this existence helped humans in the end. Until now, 600 years later, humans still had no clue. They didn't expect to get some clues from Ying Zheng. Recalling the battle, Ying Zheng could not help but have a look of lingering fear on his face. He continued, although the mysterious person who wielded the sword has never shown herself, and I have never seen her figure, I am very familiar with that sword energy. It is the ultimate skill of the Black Tortoise, the eternal truth. It is the ultimate skill of the Black Tortoise. I have seen him use it once, and I will never forget the power of that skill for the rest of my life. It's just that compared to when I saw that move, the eternal truth in the Alps battle was countless times more powerful. Therefore, I dare to guess that the person who attacked was none other than Jiyu Xuanwu. Even after 400 years, she's still alive in this world. She must have found a way to surpass Jendi, and that's how she became immortal. Maybe Fleeting Time Calendar and the other Jendi betrayed Jiyu Xuanwu in order to snatch the way to surpass Jendi from Jiyu Xuanwu. Then, to cover up his crime, Fleeting Time Calendar shamelessly covered up all the history, Ying Zheng said with certainty. Chapter 1047. After talking about the Black Tortoise, Ying Zheng immediately activated the blood magic formation and brought Hongyu to another underground palace to look for the last Grand Shaman, Chang'e. Meanwhile, Guhan and Liuanian Ling waited quietly for Yaoguang's return in this underground palace. About an hour later, Ying Zheng came back with a face full of bad luck. It turned out that the Grand Shaman, Chang'e, had run away with the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. Shanhai Pass was a huge place, and it was impossible for Ying Zheng to find Chang'e's current location. Therefore, the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was completely lost. Left with no choice, they could only return to the Taiyin Star Garrison according to their original plan. When Guhan, Liuanian Ling, Yaoguang, and Hongyu returned to the Taiyin Star Garrison, the entire Shanhai Pass was in an uproar. None of the sword-bearers had expected Guhan to single-handedly rescue Liuanian Ling and Yaoguang. The Shanhai Pass Administrative Committee immediately reported the news of Liuanian Ling's rescue to the Liuanian clan. However, they heard that the Liuanian clan was very calm. After all, for the Liuanian clan, their heirs had been in danger of losing their lives many times over the past 1,000 years, but they always managed to survive. So, the Liuanian clan had gradually become indifferent to it. After expressing their gratitude to the Shanhai Pass Administrative Committee, they hung up the communication. After that, Ji Yuhan immediately contacted the Shanhai Pass Management Committee and the Sword Committee headquarters. According to the story he had discussed with Ying Zheng in the underground palace, He reported to the Shanhai Pass Management Committee and the Sword Committee headquarters that the Grand Sorcerer had been resurrected in the land of ancestral sorcerers, and that he, Yarrow Guang, who he had rescued, and Hong Yu, the guardian of the Sun Star who had come from afar, were going to fight together. In the end, the 12 Grand Shamans gained a great advantage with the power of Zhu Wu's blood essence. Gu Han, Ying Zheng, and Hong Yu were gradually losing ground. Hong Yu was severely injured, so Ying Zheng had to reveal his identity as Emperor Qin and the Wu people. He forcibly absorbed all of Zhu Wu's blood essence and defeated the 12 Grand Shamans, killing 11 of them. However, the last Grand Shaman, Chang Yi, escaped. As Hong Yu was severely injured, she could no longer assume the position of the guardian of the Sun Star. So, Hong Yu broke her great Ju Tian Star banner and passed the position to Liuanian Ling. Ying Zheng also passed the position of the guardian of the Sun Star to Gu Han. At first, the Sword Committee headquarters did not believe Gu Han's story. They found it hard to believe that the Qin Shi Huang from 3,000 years ago was still alive in this world. But when Ying Zheng told them many secrets that could only be known by those who had personally experienced it, and brought out many pieces of evidence that could only be found in that era, including a video of himself celebrating his birthday with the fleeting calendar, and a bottle of Emperor's blood that he had carefully kept, the Sword Committee headquarters had no choice but to change their attitude from disbelief to skepticism. Therefore, the Sword Committee headquarters and the Administrative Committee of Shanhai Pass ordered Ying Zheng to return to the Sword Committee headquarters immediately to be questioned by them, while Gu Han and Liuanian Ling stayed in Shanhai Pass with peace of mind, commanding the Taiyin Star Garrison and the Sun Star Garrison, maintaining the basic order of the management, while waiting for the investigation team from the Sword Committee headquarters to be stationed in Shanhai Pass. However, Ying Zheng did not leave Shanhai Pass immediately. Instead, he stayed in Shanhai Pass, searching through every grass and tree in the city, trying to find the last trace of the Grand Shaman, Chang Yi. Unfortunately, even when the investigation team was stationed in Shanhai Pass, Ying Zheng still could not find any trace of Chang Yi. He had no choice but to leave Shanhai Pass gloomily. However, Gu Han noticed that Ying Zheng did not look too depressed. This meant that either Ying Zheng was able to achieve the realm of Zhu Wu with just 11 drops of Zhu Wu's blood essence, or Ying Zheng had some other way to get his hands on Zhu Wu's blood essence. But no matter what the result was, Gu Han had nothing to do with Ying Zheng for the time being. Back to the night of the battle in the land of Zhu Wu. After dealing with the Shanhai Pass Administrative Committee and the Sword Committee headquarters, it was already late at night. Gu Han felt like his head was about to explode. Although he had already guessed that Jiyu Xianwu would have such a conflict with Kunzu after he returned to the past, he did not expect that the conflict would be so deep. Kunzu had activated the great cultural destruction for Jiyu Xianwu, and Jiyu Xianwu might have surpassed the Emperor Sword-level swordbearers and reached an unprecedented height. But at the same time, this gave Gu Han a glimmer of hope. Since Jiyu Xianwu had surpassed Jendi and was still alive after 400 years, was it possible that Jiyu Xianwu was still alive somewhere in this world? While Gu Han was thinking about Jiyu Xianwu, Liuanian Ling was not having a good time either. She could not believe that her ancestor had activated the great cultural destruction for Jiyu Xianwu. After tossing and turning in bed for 2 hours, she could not help but call her grandfather, Fleeting Wooden Fish. "What's wrong, my precious granddaughter?" Fleeting Wooden Fish appeared in front of Liuanian Ling with a smile. He first looked at Liuanian Ling carefully through the virtual image. After making sure that Liuanian Ling was not missing an arm or a leg and that the amulet on her neck was still there, he smiled happily. "I knew that my precious granddaughter would come back safe and sound. How can the heir of the Liuanian family not experience any hardship?" During the few days that Liuanian Ling had been missing, Fleeting Wooden Fish and the Liuanian family had been very calm. However, only Fleeting Wooden Fish knew how worried they were. "Grandpa." Liuanian Ling knew that Fleeting Wooden Fish's words were filled with concern. She could not help but ask, "Grandpa, Ling has a question that I'm not sure if I should ask." "Ask away. There's nothing that Grandpa can't answer." Fleeting Wooden Fish chuckled as he stroked his beard. "Lin, I'm guessing that you're going to ask your grandfather if Ying Zheng is the same Qin Shi Huang from 3,000 years ago." Although Grandpa didn't believe that a person could live for 3,000 years, Fleeting Years Monogatari clearly stated that he had once dated Emperor Qin Shi Huang Yingzheng. Furthermore, they were good friends and had even become sworn brothers. I didn't think that he would still be alive, and that you would have the chance to meet him, Ling. What a joke. Grandpa, I'm afraid that there were more than 2 people who became sworn brothers with our ancestor. Liuyan Ling spoke up. Fleeting Wooden Fish was completely stunned. He could not help but ask after a long moment of silence, Ling, did that Yingzheng tell you something that's not true? I don't know if it's true or not, but he just told me that there weren't 2 people who were defeated by the old ancestor, but 3 people, and one of them was called Jiyu Xuanwu. Fleeting Time Lin said loudly. Ridiculous. You're talking nonsense. Fleeting Wooden Fish immediately retorted, Yingzheng has lived for more than 3,000 years, and has been reincarnated over and over again. He's long gone mad, and everything he says is full of lies. Don't believe him. How could our Kunzu have become sworn brothers with a woman called Jiyu Xuanwu? Oh, I remember you once told Grandpa that Jiyu Xuanwu is Guhan's sister. How could she have gone back 1,000 years to become sworn brothers with our ancestor? Grandpa, did I tell you that Jiyu Xuanwu is a woman? Fleeting Wooden Fish was once again rendered speechless by Fleeting Timelin's question. To think that even a sly old fox like him would slip up. Grandpa, I've never told you this, but I saw Jiyu Xuanwu enter the door of truth and eternity. I also saw our ancestor's sword soul pull her into the door of truth and eternity. I saw everything, and I'm sure that Jiyu Xuanwu has returned to the past, to our ancestors' era. I saw it all with my own eyes. Roared Liuyan Ling. If not for the soundproofing in the Sunstar Garrison, the entire Sunstar Garrison would have heard her. Also, Yingzheng told me that our ancestor had betrayed his sworn sister in the end. He was the one who sent people to hunt down Jiyu Xuanwu. In order to hide Jiyu Xuanwu, he even deliberately created the Great Cultural Destruction. It was our ancestor who destroyed the entire human civilization with his own hands, all to hide his crimes. Liuyan Ling could no longer hold back her tears, and began to wail, Grandpa, tell me, is this true? Is our ancestor really that kind of person? I'm so sad, so sad. Fleeting Lin fell to his knees and cried. That's right, I'm so sad. Fleeting Lin cried. Nonsense. It's fake, it's all fake. Fleeting Wooden Fish panicked. He tried to help Fleeting Time Ling up, but he had forgotten that he was only a hologram. He could only grab onto thin air. Yingzheng was still sleeping in the graveyard when those things happened. How would he know what happened? He doesn't know anything at all. It's all just his irresponsible speculation, retorted Fleeting Wooden Fish, but his retort only made Liuyan Ling cry even harder. Liuyan Ling discovered that Fleeting Wooden Fish knew exactly when Yingzheng entered the graveyard and was reborn. This proved that Yingzheng was telling the truth. Yingzheng, Fleeting Wooden Fish, and Jiyu Xuanwu were sworn siblings. It was also true that someone was chasing after Jiyu Xuanwu. All of this was real. Ling, listen to Grandpa. There are many things that you don't know about this. Fleeting Wooden Fish realized that he had let the cat out of the bag, and immediately tried to salvage the situation. Grandpa can promise you that our ancestor would never cause the great cultural destruction just for Jiyu Xuanwu. Our ancestor was really deceived. He thought that all of the human civilization would be enough to destroy the foundation of Yuan Ku's existence. He was really deceived. Fleeting Wooden Fish stomped his feet as he spoke, trying to make himself more convincing. Grandpa, I want to see Fleeting Monogatari with my own eyes, said Liuyan Ling suddenly after a long period of crying. Chapter 1048. Fleeting Time Monogatari was the absolute secret of the Liuyan family. It was said that Fleeting Time had a premonition of his impending doom when he participated in the final battle in Sichuan, so he spent 10 days writing it. Fleeting Time Monogatari was equivalent to Kunzu's autobiography. Kunzu had recorded his entire life in Fleeting Time Monogatari, including many of his most secretive matters. At the same time, Fleeting Time Monogatari also recorded many of Kunzu's messages to his descendants, as well as some of his requests. For example, if his descendants were to meet Gilgamesh, they must be killed by his sword spirit. In addition, There were also some prophecies recorded in Fleeting Time story. It was said that the sword ancestor had predicted all the major events that would happen 3,000 years later in Fleeting Time story. The Lionian family had relied on the prophecies in Fleeting Time story to survive through crisis after crisis. All in all, Fleeting Time Monogatari was an extremely mysterious book. Aside from the Liu family and a few other families, no one knew of its existence. Even in the Liu family, not everyone had the right to read Fleeting Time Monogatari. According to the rules, only the head of the family over the age of 60 had the right to read Fleeting Time Monogatari. Thus, in the entire Liu family, only Fleeting Time Wooden Fish had read Fleeting Time Monogatari. As for Lionian Ling's father, he would have to wait another 7 years before he could read Fleeting Time Monogatari, while Lionian Ling would have to wait another 41 years. Logically speaking, when Lionian Ling asked Fleeting Time Wooden Fish to read Fleeting Time Monogatari, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish should have rejected her decisively. However, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish hesitated as he recalled a line in Fleeting Time Monogatari. Any descendants who wish to read the Fleeting Time Monogatari after meeting my brother Ying Zheng can read the story on page 128 of the Fleeting Time Monogatari. In other words, if any of his descendants from the Fleeting Years calendar met Ying Zheng and requested to read the Fleeting story, they would be allowed to browse through the story recorded on page 128 of the Fleeting story. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish did not think much of the words when he first read them. After all, not a single one of his descendants had seen the mysterious Ying Zheng in the past 1,000 years. It was impossible for such a thing to happen while he was still alive. But today, when Fleeting Wooden Fish received news from the Shanghai Pass Management Committee that Ying Zheng had returned to the world, and that Ying Zheng had rescued Lionian Ling together with Guhan, Fleeting Wooden Fish could not help but think of this, and he began to panic. Just as Fleeting Time Wooden Fish had feared, Ying Zheng had told Lionian Ling many things, and Lionian Ling had expressed her desire to read Fleeting Time Monogatari. Forget it. Since the old ancestor has spoken, I can't escape from this. It looks like I'll have to let Ling read page 128. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish felt a headache coming on. The information recorded on page 128 was too important, and Lionian Ling would not be able to accept it if word of it were to spread. Even Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was shocked for 3 hours when he first read page 128. Fortunately, Fleeting Wooden Fish was already in his 60s at the time. His knowledge and experience were far greater than Fleeting Ling's, which was why he was able to accept the situation calmly. Fleeting Wooden Fish could not imagine what would have happened to Fleeting Wooden Fish when he saw the scene. However, there was one thing that Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was certain of. Once Lionian Ling finished reading page 128, she and Guhan would become strangers. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish did not know if this was a good or bad thing for Ling. He could only blame the complicated relationship between the Fleeting family and the Jiyu family. Time passed by quickly. It had been a month since the investigation team from the Union of Swordsmen arrived at Shanghai Pass. Over the past month, the investigation team had repeatedly confirmed that the sorcerer tribe's grand sorcerers had not been resurrected. Furthermore, the sorcerers who had been killed could not be resurrected. Their blood would only coagulate and turn into a drop of blood. Due to the inability to resurrect, the population of the Wu people was dwindling under the continuous attacks of the swordsmen. Many of the Wu people began to hide in the lush forests to avoid being hunted by the humans. They no longer dared to initiate any attacks on the humans. Because of this, after a month of investigation and confirmation, the investigation team finally came to the conclusion that the blood essence of the Grand Wizard had indeed been completely destroyed, and the Grand Wizard could not be resurrected. Humans could finally be freed from the sad Shanghai Pass that was filled with tears and blood. The results of the investigation caused the entire human society to be in an uproar. People in every city began to sing and dance in celebration of this great victory. Not only did this mean that humans no longer had to worry about their loved ones dying in Shanghai Pass, but it also meant that humans could finally mobilize a huge force from Shanghai Pass. The base cities became safer, and the forces that humans could mobilize also greatly increase. According to the conclusion of a certain expert, due to the impact of the great victory in Shanghai Pass, the strength of humans had increased by about 10% in an instant. This was something that was worth celebrating and dancing for. However, under the influence of some scheming people, the greatest victory was mainly given to two people. One was naturally the young mistress of the Liuonian family, Liuonian Ling. Without any hesitation, as long as people heard Liuonian Ling's name in the list of meritorious contributors, they would naturally give the main credit to Liuonian Ling. What a joke! Such an important victory was not won by the great Liuonian family, but by that damned Yuzhong bastard, Gu Han. The second person was Emperor Qin Shi Huang Yingzheng, who had appeared like a comet. In fact, the Sword Council had deliberately concealed the matter of Yingzheng. However, when Yingzheng returned to Yangjing City for investigation, all kinds of news about Yingzheng, be it on the internet or in the newspapers, came crashing down on humans in various ways. In just one day, all the human beings learned that the human emperor 3,000 years ago, the great Emperor Qin Shi Huang, Yingzheng, was not dead. Instead, he had lived until now through a miraculous art of immortality, and had been secretly protecting the human race all this time. There were also a lot of photographic evidence in the newspapers, and there were also many videos on the internet of Yingzheng with many famous figures in history. For example, there was a video of Yingzheng playing chess with the Sword Ancestor. The Sword Ancestor even called Yingzheng Big Brother intimately, while Yingzheng called the Sword Ancestor Second Brother. There were even 20 to 30 web novels that began to vividly describe all the great things that Yingzheng had done in the past 1,000 years. Such overwhelming propaganda forced the humans to quickly accept that one of their ancestors from 3,000 years ago was still alive, and that he was a great savior secretly protecting the human race. It was only then that the Sword Council realized that Yingzheng had secretly built up a lot of power over the past 1,000 years, and this power had finally exploded in an instant. There were even many highly respected swordbearers who came forward to say that they had fought side by side with Yingzheng in his previous life. These swordbearers were telling the truth. They had indeed fought side by side with Yingzheng in his previous life. It was something that happened about 60 years ago, but these venerable old swordbearers were still children in their 20s or 30s, while Yingzheng was already an old man in his 80s or 90s at that time. Yingzheng and these old swordbearers all acknowledged each other, and told them many things that had happened in the past, convincing them. These venerable old swordbearers had a huge network of connections that even the Sword Council found it hard to resist. Therefore, the council dared not to do anything bad to Yingzheng. On top of that, the entire investigation process was broadcasted live on TV. As Yingzheng only told those things that had happened in the past, the result of the investigation became clearer and clearer, and the fact that Yingzheng was Qin Shi Huang was accepted by more and more people. Coupled with the fact that Yingzheng had killed the Wu people, the Sword Council finally acknowledged Yingzheng's identity with a 50% reluctance and a 50% reluctance. They publicly granted Yingzheng citizenship and a large number of rewards to reward him for his contribution in maintaining the neutrality of Shanhai Pass. When Yingzheng accepted the citizenship, he even held a large-scale ceremony through TV. During the ceremony, he publicly announced that he was willing to establish a fund with all the rewards he had received, to reward those ancient and treasured swordbearers who were still fighting on the front line. At the end of the ceremony, he even announced that because he had absorbed Zhu Wu's blood essence, he would become the new Zhu Wu in 10 years at the latest. After becoming Zhu Wu, he would truly be immortal, and he would no longer need to turn back into a baby and be buried in a grave. Finally, Yingzheng promised all the people that he would continue to provide protection for mankind for the next 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years. Mankind would have an emperor sword-bearer who would never ascend. After such a big promotion, people all over the world cheered and jumped for joy. Some people even shed tears of excitement, shouting that mankind was finally saved. Long live His Majesty, Qin Shi Huang, and other such things. The popularity of this news overshadowed all other news. For a whole year, the topic on people's lips was Yingzheng. It was just like when Trump was elected President of the United States, the topic of the people in the United States could never be separated from Trump. All in all, the biggest contributor of the Shanhai Pass battle, Gu Han, was overshadowed by the clamor. This was in line with the thoughts of some of the higher-ups of the Sword Council. Therefore, Other than a reward that was given to Guhan like Liuyan Ling and Ying Zheng, Guhan did not receive any other benefits. Most people did not even know who the real contributor was. Chapter 1049. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 2.5 years had passed. Compared to the bustling Shanghai Pass 2.5 years ago, the Shanghai Pass now seemed very quiet. 2.5 years ago, there were more than 14,000 swordsmen in Shanghai Pass. There were battles on the defensive line every day, and the entire Ju Tianstar formation was very lively. But now, there were less than 1,000 people left in Shanghai Pass. This was the minimum number needed to maintain the heavenly cycle star formation. Almost all the ancient sword-grade swordbearers had been evacuated. Only a few ancient sword-grade swordbearers remained in the more important positions. As for the number of famed sword-rank swordbearers, it did not decrease. This was because every great heavenly cycle star banner had to be guarded by a famed sword-rank swordsman. This was the only way to maintain the stability of the great heavenly cycle star formation despite the large number of ancient sword-rank swordsmen being lost. Ever since it was confirmed that Zhu Wu's essence blood had been destroyed and that all the Wu people could not be revived, the humans, under the leadership of Guhan and Liuyan Ling, started to kill all the Wu people. The Wu people, who had lost their ability to revive and their great shamans, could not resist the slaughter led by Guhan and Liuyan Ling. 200,000 Wu people were killed in a year, and it was estimated that only a few thousand Wu people were left hiding in the dense forests. If the humans wanted to kill the rest of the Wu people, they would have to pay a heavy price. Therefore, after some consideration by the Sword Committee, they believed that the Magi in Shanghai Pass were no longer a threat, so they began to transfer the sword-bearers away in batches. In the end, it became the current situation. Ji Han also went from leading more than 7,000 sword-bearers to less than 500 sword-bearers. If not for the fact that the famed sword-level sword-bearers could not be transferred away, the 12 Grand Shamans might have broken through the suppression of the great heavenly cycle star formation, and the humans would have transferred the last famed sword-level sword-bearers away. However, the famous swordsmen in the Ju Tianstar formation had all been transferred away by the Sword Committee. Some of them had only been in Shanghai Pass for less than a year, but they were also transferred away. As for Liuyan Ling, after confirming that the Wu people were no longer a threat, she left Shanghai Pass immediately. She had only been in Shanghai Pass for a year and a half. What puzzled Guhan was that ever since they broke up that day, Liuyan Ling had started to deliberately distance herself from him. Not only did she refuse to accept any of his calls, she did not even look at Guhan when they fought side by side. It was as if Guhan did not exist. Liuyan Ling did not even inform Guhan when she left Shanghai Pass. She left on her own. It was hard to believe that the two had been in a heated relationship before this. Guhan felt a dull pain in his heart. He did not know why Liuyan Ling would treat him like this, but Guhan knew that the root of the problem must be with the Liuyan clan. So, Guhan had to make a trip to the Liuyan clan and find out the truth about the Black Tortoise. But before that, Guhan had to spend 3 years in Shanghai Pass. After killing all the Wu people, Guhan actually had nothing to do for a year and a half. This became a rare time for Guhan to relax. He brought his sword mistress around Shanghai Pass and perfected his swordsmanship at the same time. One should not underestimate this year and a half. Before this, Guhan had been like a clockwork machine, advancing without regard for anything else. Although Ling looked mighty and powerful, Guhan was already exhausted internally. His body was filled with all sorts of hidden injuries, both physical and mental. After a year and a half of recuperation, Guhan's entire temperament had changed. He had gradually become more reserved from the sharp and unparalleled swordsman. He had retracted all of his sharpness into his body. He usually looked no different from an ordinary person on the side of the road. It was hard to imagine that Guhan was an unparalleled and powerful swordsman. All in all, after dealing with the Wu people, Guhan had completely disappeared. Not only was there no news about Guhan in the real world, but even the military governor in the game did not come online again. Humans were forgetful creatures. No matter how famous the admiral was back then, when he didn't have any new events, when there were other people with explosive news, Humans would always be attracted by these new things and gradually forget about this person who had once caused them to gasp in surprise. That was why when a familiar-looking fellow suddenly appeared in a tea house in the game, no one around recognized that this was the admiral who had once been popular throughout the game. Look! Isn't that the toad who eats black chicken white phoenix pills? Why is he here? Suddenly, a loud shout came from the tea house. It turned out that a person with glossy hair and the aura of a successful person walked into the tea house with 4 sword maidens behind him. This person was none other than the toad who eats black chicken white phoenix pills, who had recently become very popular in the game. It's too noisy here. Let's go to a private room. Toad sat opposite Guhan, touching his glossy hair and said with a silly smile. It's fine. This place is pretty good. Guhan shook his head and pressed a button on the table. A few curtains automatically extended from both sides of the tea house, turning the originally public tea house into a rather small enclosed space. F***CK. Since when did this tea house have such an advanced function? Why didn't I know about it? Toad said in surprise. I think it's because you haven't been to a tea house for a long time. Guhan smiled faintly. Looks like you've been doing well with Ying Zheng. What Ying Zheng? We still like to call him Boss Yaoguang. Toad scratched his head in a simple and honest manner, then began to order all sorts of drinks for the 4 sword maidens beside him. Recently, Boss Yaoguang has mentioned 4 big goals to achieve, which is to make Yaoguang Sword Faction the #1 sword faction in the game. We've been so busy running around, how could we have the time to come to a small place like this to drink tea? Is that so? Is Ying Zheng finally ready to make a move against the Stormy Wave Sword Faction? Guhan said in a slightly mocking tone. 3 years ago, he had put in a lot of effort to push Yaoguang Sword Faction into the ranks of the top 10 sword factions. Who would have thought that after 3 years, Yaoguang Sword Faction was already preparing to snatch the title of #1 sword faction? However, there was nothing strange about this. Yaoguang had long announced his true identity as Ying Zheng in the game, attracting a large number of fans to join Yaoguang Sword Faction in real life. Yaoguang Sword Faction's strength was not inferior to the Stormy Wave Sword Faction. In fact, its overall strength was more than 10 to 20%. On top of that, Ying Zheng had already become an Emperor sword wielder in the game, so it was only natural that he wanted to snatch the title of #1 sword faction. I say, Sour Popsicle, for the past 3 years, other than communicating with me occasionally, you haven't expressed any other intentions. Why do you suddenly want to meet me today? Toad asked curiously. I heard that you've become a famed sword wielder in real life. Guhan didn't answer Song Hammer's question. Instead, he asked Song Hammer a question. Song Hammer immediately patted his chest proudly and said, That's not true. I'm not as crazy as you, becoming a famed sword wielder in a few months. It took me only 3 years to go from ancient sword to famed sword. I, Song Hammer, am one of the fastest people in Yuzhang City. Song Hammer was right. Reaching the famed sword rank in 3 years was indeed one of the best results in the base city. Most sword bearers would need more than 10 years to reach the famed sword rank from the ancient sword rank. Song Hammer could already be described as an unparalleled genius in just 3 years. You're already a spiritual sword wielder in the game. It seems that it's only a matter of time before you become one in real life. Guhan took a few glances at Song Hammer's sword maidens and realized that they were all lively and full of life. Clearly, these sword maidens were real sword maidens. Oh, I forgot to introduce you to my sword maidens. Song Hammer patted his head and began to introduce his sword maidens in the game one by one. I won't introduce Cast Cloud Iron. Her life was saved by you, Guhan. Brother Guhan, long time no see. Cast Cloud Iron was still tall and mighty, but she no longer had the carefree look she had 3 years ago. Instead, there was a hint of worry that only a little girl would have. And looking at her cautious attitude toward the other sword maidens, the source of this worry was obvious. After all, the Cast Cloud Steel was just an ancient sword maiden. When Song Hammer was still an ancient sword-tier swordswoman, all the cause revolved around the Cast Cloud Steel. Naturally, the Cast Cloud Steel was one of a kind. But now, even in the real world, Song Hammer was already a famed swordswoman. The core sword mistress had obviously been replaced by an even more powerful famed sword mistress. In addition, Cast Cloud Iron's tall figure did not appeal to ordinary men. One could imagine how depressed she was. "It's okay. Look for me. I'll help you teach that stinky toad a lesson." Guhan smiled and nodded at Cast Cloud Iron. He said something meaningful, causing Cast Cloud Iron's eyes to turn red. It seemed like she had suffered a lot because of Song Hammer. However, seeing how heartless Song Hammer was, it was obvious that he did not realize this. "This is my treasured sword, the mountain suppressing sword. You guys didn't see it in the Jinyuan Garrison Mana Crusade dungeon. However, I'm telling you now, the mountain suppressing sword is also my treasured sword in real life." Song Hammer introduced the similarly tall and mighty mountain suppressing sword. "Hello, Mr. Military Governor." It had been more than 3 years, but the mountain suppressing sword still did not forget the ferocity and strength that the military governor had displayed in the Jinyuan Garrison dungeon. She still had enough respect for Guhan. "This is my famed sword Maiden, the dark steel heavy sword. How is it? It's amazing, right? It's also my famed sword Maiden in real life," Song Hammer proudly introduced. "She's really powerful." Guhan could not help but nod. The Sword Maiden was ranked 3rd among the famed swords. She was the initiator of his Chaos Sword style. She had once been able to suppress his own Sword Maiden. Guhan did not expect Song Hammer to be able to synchronize with such a Sword Maiden. This Song Hammer was truly powerful. Chapter 1050. He did not expect Recondite Iron Heavy Sword to become Song Hammer's famed Sword Lady. Guhan could not help but laugh. Previously, Recondite Iron Heavy Sword was Long Yu's nemesis Sword Maiden. When Song Hammer synchronized Recondite Iron Heavy Sword's main body and Long Yu realized that his Recondite Iron Heavy Sword had become an artificial Sword Maiden without a soul, his expression would definitely be very rich. "You're actually the Stinky Toad's friend? Enemies are bound to meet," the Lady of Recondite Iron Heavy Sword said through gritted teeth as she looked at Guhan. It seemed like the Lady of Recondite Iron Heavy Sword had not forgotten about her crushing defeat at Guhan's hands 3 years ago. Although it was only a consciousness fragment of Recondite Iron Heavy Sword that had fought Guhan back then, it was not the Recondite Iron Heavy Sword's main consciousness. However, that consciousness fragment had returned to the Recondite Iron Heavy Sword's main consciousness. Hence, the Recondite Iron Heavy Sword remembered this memory clearly. Even thinking about it now made the Lady of Recondite Iron Heavy Sword feel very displeased. Ji Yuhan smiled faintly, but did not say anything. The Recondite Iron Heavy Sword was Song Hammer's Sword Lady, after all. She was already considered one of them, so Guhan could not be bothered to argue with her. However, the Recondite Iron Heavy Sword was still unwilling to give up. "Back then, you shamelessly learned my consciousness fragment's solitary 9 swords, but times are different now. My consciousness fragment's sword technique isn't even half of my main consciousnesses. Today, I'll show you what the real solitary 9 swords is. How can an ignorant brat like you learn it secretly? You want to fight me? This isn't a suitable place, is it?" Guhan frowned. At that moment, the waiter at the tea house brought over a few cups of green tea. A few tea leaves that looked like boats floated on the surface of the green tea. It looked calm and elegant, pleasing to the eye. When the Lady of Recondite Iron Heavy Sword saw the tea, her eyes suddenly lit up. "Why don't we spar with this tea?" "How do you want to spar?" Guhan asked curiously. "How about we use the chopsticks as swords and the tea leaves in the tea as targets?" The Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword took out 2 chopsticks from the chopstick container and placed one in front of Guhan. "Later, I'll shake this cup of tea into the air. Then, both of us will use this chopstick to absorb the tea leaves floating in the air. Let's see who can absorb the most tea leaves in the end. How about that? What kind of damnable method is this?" Song Hammer, Cast Cloud Steel, and Mountain Suppression Sword exchanged glances. They had never heard of such a way of swordsmanship. Using chopsticks to absorb the tea leaves floating in the air was indeed an unheard of way of fighting, and it could indeed not hurt the friendship between the two sides. It was the best way to compete, but was this really something that humans could do? No problem. Guhan nodded, and it could be considered that he had agreed to the recondite steel heavy swords challenge. Then, let's begin. The moment Guhan said that, the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword immediately slammed the table. There were 6 cups of tea on the table, but only the one closest to the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword flew into the air. The rest of the tea remained unmoved on the table. Clearly, the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's control over her strength had reached an extremely high realm. She could shrink a huge amount of force into a single point. When the teacup was about 1 meter away from the table, it suddenly exploded. The tea and the tea leaves fell down like raindrops. The Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword picked up the chopsticks in her hand and stabbed them at the tea in the air. In the blink of an eye, the chopsticks in the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's hand had already absorbed 7 or 8 tea leaves. From this, one could see how fast the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's swordsmanship was and how precise her aim was. What surprised the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword was that the chopsticks in Guhan's hand did not move in the slightest. It was as if he had no intention of competing with the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword. Is he looking down on me? Is he trying to lose to me on purpose? The Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword was infuriated. She stopped absorbing the tea leaves and used her chopsticks to stab at Guhan's eyes. Sigh. Guhan sighed inwardly. He had indeed planned to lose to the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword on purpose so that he could let bygones be bygones and avoid hurting his relationship with Songhammer. However, the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword was stabbing at his eyes with her chopsticks. If he continued to tolerate it, he would not be Guhan. However, Guhan did not do anything else. He only slammed the table lightly, and the chopsticks that were placed beside his hand instantly flew into the air like springs, blocking the path of the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's chopsticks. The 2 chopsticks instantly collided. The violent collision caused the 2 chopsticks to lose their momentum and fall to the table at the same time. Enough. Enough. That's it. Obsidian Heavy Sword, you. Forget it. It's a draw. It's a draw. Songhammer hurriedly said. Songhammer was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat. He did not expect his famed sword-rank Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword to attack Guhan with chopsticks. This was no longer within the scope of a spar. It was more like a stab in the back. However, Songhammer was clearly afraid of the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword. He had wanted to scold the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword, but he swallowed his words. It seemed that Songhammer did not have any status in front of the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword. No. I've lost. Songhammer had wanted to let the 2 of them call it a draw, but he did not expect the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword to take the initiative to admit defeat with a gloomy expression. This surprised Songhammer greatly. When did this ancestor of his learn to take the initiative to admit defeat? Songhammer immediately looked at the chopsticks on the table and was shocked to find that the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's chopsticks, which had 7 or 8 tea leaves stuck to them, now had not a single tea leaf stuck to them. Meanwhile, there were 7 or 8 tea leaves on Guhan's chopsticks. Clearly, these tea leaves came from the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's chopsticks. In the instant that the 2 chopsticks clashed, Guhan's chopsticks had actually snatched away all the tea leaves on the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword's chopsticks. Songhammer was speechless at this. What kind of brilliant swordsmanship was required to achieve this? He did not expect that after not seeing him for 3 years, Guhan's swordsmanship had improved so terrifyingly. It was no wonder that the Lady of Obsidian Heavy Sword was willing to admit defeat. Great swordsmanship. I'm afraid that even Monarch Donghua is no match for such swordsmanship, a voice said in a daze. When Guhan raised his head, he found that the voice came from Songhammer's spirit sword, the Sword Lady. Songhammer quickly introduced, "This is my spirit sword, the Sword Lady's Sky Evasion Sword." So, it's her. Guhan immediately understood. The Sky Evasion Sword was the legendary sword of Monarch Donghua, who was also the leader of the 8 Immortals, Pure Yang Daoist Lu Dongbin. It was said that it was a peerless divine weapon refined by Fire Dragon Daoist. Lu Dongbin was famous for his flying sword technique. He was a top-notch swordsman in history. The Sword Lady would not lie. Since Lu Dongbin's sword, the Sky Evasion Sword, said that Guhan's swordsmanship had surpassed Lu Dongbin's, then Guhan's swordsmanship must have surpassed Lu Dongbin's. Sky evasion, is what you said true? Has Brother Guhan's swordsmanship really surpassed Monarch Donghua's? Song Hammer still asked in disbelief. It's not like Lu Dongbin hasn't fought with Dugu Chobai before, but he was still beaten to a pulp by Dugu Chobai. I know Lu Dongbin's strength better than Tian Dun. Even 3 Lu Dongbins combined wouldn't be a match for your brother, the lady of black iron heavy sword said impatiently. She clearly didn't think much of Lu Dongbin. Maybe. Guhan smiled. It's useless to talk about it. We'll know after we fight. Song Hammer was speechless. Song Hammer told Guhan about what happened in the past 2 to 3 years. He felt that the brotherly relationship had become close again. So, Song Hammer asked, Brother, you've stayed in Shanghai Pass for almost 3 years. When will you come out of Shanghai Pass? There's no need for an expert like you to guard that place, right? Soon. Just in a few days. Guhan nodded. I haven't been back to Yuzhong City for 3 years. I miss everything there. It's time for me to go back and see. That's true. Your disciple has had a hard time in the past 3 years, especially that new chairman of the Sword Council. He treats your disciple like a thorn in his side, a thorn in his flesh. You let your pitiful disciple, a mere ancient sword rank sword wielder, sit in the position of Sword Pavilion Master for 3 years. If it were me, I would have been driven mad long ago, Song Hammer said with a lingering fear in his voice. What did you say? Ji Yuhan frowned. You're saying that Lu Shihua is still an ancient sword tier swordsman? Yes. Why didn't you know? Song Hammer was stunned. Shihua clearly told me that she had already become a treasure sword tier sword wielder 2 years ago. Last year, she became a famed sword tier sword wielder. Soon, she would be able to synchronize with the spirit sword tier sword maiden. I always thought that these 3 years were very smooth for her. Ji Yuhan cried out. That's impossible. She's still an ancient sword wielder, trustworthy. Song Hammer said angrily. You don't know how much the new chairman of the Sword Council and those old guys are going overboard. They said that since Lu Shihua took over the position of Sword Pavilion Master, she should do everything herself and be perfect. Therefore, they forced Lu Shihua to do everything by himself. They even made Lu Shihua do some things when he was free. As a result, Lu Shihua could only stay in the Sword Pavilion for the past 3 years. He couldn't even go out of the Sword Pavilion, let alone go out of the city to fight with Yuanko. If she didn't fight Yuan Ku, where would she get the sword essence? Without the sword essence, how could Lu Shihua increase her level? Song Hammer sighed. What's worse is that those people keep saying that Lu Shihua is a lazy glutton, that he has no talent, and that he doesn't have the ability to become a sword-level sword wielder. He only knows how to hide in the sword garret and enjoy his life. Yuzhong City is full of complaints about Lu Shihua, and the sword garret is also in chaos. Your disciple is only in her early 20s, but now she looks like a woman in her 30s. How pitiful. Shihua. Guhan couldn't help clenching his fists. In the past 3 years, Guhan had talked to Lu Shihua several times. Every time, Lu Shihua told Guhan that he was fine and that everything was fine in Yuzhong City. Moreover, Guhan had been immersed in fighting and perfecting his swordsmanship. After hearing Lu Shihua say that Yuzhong City was fine, Guhan didn't pay much attention to Yuzhong City. Therefore, he didn't hear anything about Lu Shihua in the past 3 years. This made Guhan feel deeply guilty. He had arranged for Lu Shihua to be the Sword Pavilion Master in Yuzhong City, but he hadn't considered the future. He didn't expect that he would enter Shanghai Pass so soon. Lu Shihua, a young ancient sword wielder without any background, had to endure the schemes of countless old foxes for 3 years. One could imagine what kind of pain and torture Lu Shihua had gone through in the past 3 years. Some people need to pay the price. Guhan picked up the cup of tea in front of him and drank it in one gulp. Back then, he wasn't strong enough and could only use various means to barely deal with the attacks of those old foxes. But now it was different. It seemed that Guhan needed to make some bastards pay the price. Chapter 1051. It seems like I've stayed here for too long. After leaving the game, Guhan sighed. He did not expect that his carefree life over the past few years had caused Lu Shihua's life to be so bitter. However, this kind of life was finally coming to an end. After another day, Guhan would have spent 3 years in Shanhai Pass. Finally, it was time for Guhan to leave Shanhai Pass. However, this night did not seem to be peaceful. The moonlight in the sky trembled slightly. With a thought, Guhan suddenly tapped the void on his left. The entire space trembled, and a figure fell out of the void. Chang'e. It's actually you. When Guhan saw the person he had knocked out of the void, he could not help but be surprised. This person was actually the last great witch, Chang'e, whom the humans had been searching for 2.5 years in Shanhai Pass to no avail. Are you here to ambush me? Guhan looked at Chang'e with interest. I didn't expect to have such a life before I left. It can be said that I've completely resolved a problem for the humans. After saying that, a 3-foot-long sword chi appeared on Guhan's finger. What was noteworthy was that Guhan was not holding any sword mothers in his hand. Guhan was relying on his own body to release the 3-foot-long sword chi. Everyone knew that if a swordsman wanted to release sword chi, he had to have a sword mother in his hand. Sword chi. Sword chi. How could there be chi without a sword? However, at this moment, Guhan could release sword chi out of thin air. Perhaps only the sword masters knew how terrifying this was. Wait, Chang'e hurriedly said. I'm not here to kill you. I was already in your room when you were playing the game. If I wanted to kill you, wouldn't it have been better to do it then? You wouldn't have been able to kill me then, Guhan said disdainfully. If you dare to come within 5 meters of me, I can kill you even in the game. Guhan's words made Chang'e gulp involuntarily. She did want to get closer to Guhan, but once she was within 5 meters of him, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if she would be killed if she took another step forward. Therefore, Chang'e wisely decided to give up and waited for Guhan to come out of the game from afar. She didn't expect that this action would actually save her life. Speak. Why are you looking for me? You're not really here to die, are you? Ji Yuhan said as he looked at Chang'e's ugly face, which looked as if it had been splashed with acid. Do you think I'm ugly? Perhaps sensing the disdain in Guhan's eyes, Chang'e's emotions were suddenly stirred, and her voice suddenly became high-pitched. Coupled with her ugly appearance, it was like the howling of a demon. Do you know? Am I the most beautiful woman in the world? I know. Guhan nodded. Your Chang'e sword has told our media more than once that you are indeed beautiful. Is that so? Does anyone still remember my beauty? Chang'e suddenly fell silent, but then her face was filled with resentment. Do you know why I, the most beautiful woman in the world, became like this? What do you want from me? Guhan frowned. He had no interest in listening to Chang'e's story. I don't want anything. You don't have anything on you that I want. Chang'e smiled strangely, then took out a wooden box made of unknown materials. She opened the wooden box, and a drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was shockingly placed inside. This drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence is for you. Chang'e directly placed the box in front of Guhan. As long as Ying Zheng doesn't get this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, then he can forget about becoming Zhu Wu for the rest of his life. What are you scheming? Looking at the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, Guhan's expression became increasingly unfriendly. I hate men like you the most. All of you are scheming and plotting. Chang'e looked at Guhan with disdain. I'll tell you the truth. This drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence is the key to resurrecting the 12 Zhu Wus in the future. I'm giving this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence to you so that the 12 Zhu Wus can be resurrected. I've already told you my scheme. How you deal with it is up to you. After saying this, Chang'e did something that caused Guhan to turn pale with fright. That was, her body actually began to dissolve. In the blink of an eye, this Grand Witch Chang'e had turned into a drop of blood, floating on the floor. This drop of blood was exactly the same as the other Grand Witches. Clearly, Chang'e had committed suicide. Guhan looked indifferently at the drop of blood on the floor, and the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence on the table. The last Wu people who had escaped the net, Grand Witch Chang'e, had actually appeared in front of him of her own accord. Then, she handed over the last drop of the Wu people's blood essence to him. In the end, she had directly committed suicide, not giving Guhan any chance to ask any questions. She had even blatantly told Guhan that this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was the key to resurrecting Zhu Wu. Only God would know what kind of scheme Chang Yi was secretly plotting. However, no matter what, how to deal with this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence had become a rather troublesome matter. Since Chang Yi had said that this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence was the key to resurrecting Zhu Wu, if he allowed it to remain in Shanhai Pass, it might cause trouble for his successor. After all, there were currently less than 1,000 swordsmen in Shanhai Pass. These 1,000 swordsmen could not control the situation at all. If something went wrong, the Ju Tian Star battle formation might really collapse. If he brought this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence with him, Guhan would always feel that he had fallen into the Wu people's trap. The Wu people wanted him to bring this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence with him. Actually, the best way was to find a way to destroy this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. However, the level of Zhu Wu's blood essence was too high. It was the level of an Emperor sword wielder. Currently, Guhan was only a famed sword wielder. There was no way he could destroy this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. All of a sudden, Guhan fell into a deadlock in order to deal with this drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence. At that moment, a little fellow barged into Guhan's room without knocking. He hugged a pillow and shouted, "Guhan, Duyu is so naughty. You put your foot in his mouth. Can Qingpin sleep with you today?" Looking at the sleepy Qingpin, Guhan did not know what to say. If Qingpin slept with him, he would not have to worry about Duyu putting his foot in his mouth. However, he would have to worry about Qingpin putting his foot in his mouth. Oh no! Suddenly, Guhan thought of something. He immediately put the drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence into his dimensional pocket. However, he was still one step too late. Cut! Qingpin suddenly spat out a word that Guhan had not heard for more than 2 years. Then, the wooden box in Guhan's hand disappeared into thin air. In the next second, the wooden box appeared in Qingpin's hand. At that moment, Qingpin's height was pulled up to the height of a young girl. "It's you." Guhan touched his head with a headache. He did not expect that young girl Qingpin, one of Guhan's biggest headaches, would jump out again. "Damn it. You actually hid so many things from me." As soon as young girl Qingpin appeared, she had a somewhat ferocious expression. However, this ferocious expression was not directed at Guhan, but at herself. "I was wondering why I did not absorb any of the Wu people's blood essence after such a long time. It turns out that you were lying to me. You actually dared to block your own memory. If I did not suddenly jump out after smelling Zhu Wu's blood essence today, I would not have known that you actually hid so many things from me in the past 3 years." Young girl Qingpin flew into a rage. "Today, I will clean up the house and erase your traitorous thought." Stop! At that moment, no matter how stupid Guhan was, he understood what young girl Qingpin meant. At first, Guhan was a little puzzled as to why young girl Qingpin had never come out to cause trouble for him in the past 3 years when he had not used Qingpin's sword to kill a single Wu people. It turned out that the lowly Qingpin had blocked his memory, so the sleeping young girl Qingpin did not know what had happened outside. However, today, Chang Yi had brought out the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence, and the lowly Qingpin had coincidentally barged into his room. The power of Zhu Wu's blood essence had directly awakened young girl Qingpin, which was why the scene before Guhan's eyes had happened. At that moment, young girl Qingpin was furious at the lowly Qingpin's concealment. She was actually prepared to directly wipe out the lowly Qingpin's consciousness. How could Guhan allow young girl Qingpin's plan to succeed? He left and shouted loudly, "Three-edged treasured sword, Qingpin. Qingpin sword, if you dare to touch my Qingpin, I can cut off the sword mark between us and then throw you into the dimensional whirlpool so that you can forget about returning to this world for the rest of your life. I mean what I say. Are you threatening me? Young girl Qingpin." "Oh, no. Let's call her Qingpin now." Although Qingpin sounded extremely angry, she could not help but lower her raised hand. Clearly, Guhan's threat had worked. Qingpin was indeed afraid that Guhan would cut off her sword mark and throw her into the dimensional whirlpool. "It's fine if I don't wipe out this traitorous fellow." I want her to see with her own eyes how you die in her own hand. Qingping sneered. Then, she ate the last drop of Zhu Wu's blood essence in the box. After a series of changes, she turned back into the lowly Qingpin. Guhan. Qingpin looked at Guhan with teary eyes. After hesitating for a while, she said in a trembling voice, Guhan, hurry up and cut off Qingpin's sword mark. Qingpin does not want to see Guhan die with her own eyes. Qingpin does not want to die in Guhan's hands. All right. It's fine. Everything will be fine. Don't think about these messy things. Guhan hugged Qingpin tightly in his arms and comforted her gently. Guhan knew very well that if he broke off the sword mark between him and Qingpin, then Qingping, the main consciousness, would definitely erase Qingpin, the subconsciousness, and he would kill this poor fellow. Don't worry, Qingpin. Guhan will definitely let you live a happy life. Guhan kissed Qingpin's face hard. Then, his mind began to move quickly. Looks like it's time to give Qingpin a new body, just like Qijian. Guhan thought to himself. This was also the best solution Guhan could think of. It was to let Qingpin's soul completely break away from Qingping's control. Let her grow into an independent personality, an independent sword mistress, just like King Yu. Chapter 1052. Guhan did not sleep well for the entire night. He was thinking about how to save Qingpin from Qingping's clutches. With Qijian as an example, Guhan did not think that it would be difficult to create a new body for Qingpin. The real difficulty was how to separate Qingpin's soul from Qingpin's sword, and then find a place for Qingpin's soul to reside temporarily. It was conceivable that when he decided to separate Qingpin's soul, Qingping would try her best to stop him. If he was not careful, Qingpin might be erased by Qingping. Therefore, Guhan had to be very careful. Before he found a way to separate Qingpin's soul safely, Guhan could not act rashly, let alone alert the enemy. Therefore, maintaining the status quo was the best solution. By the time Jiyu Han had a rough idea of what was going on, the entire world had turned bright. It was already the morning of the second day, and it was also Jiyu Han's last day in Shanhai Pass. 3 days ago, Guhan had already informed all the other sword-bearers to come to Taiyin Garrison for a meeting. He would hold a succession ceremony and hand over the position of the Guardian of Taiyin to the next Guardian. Therefore, Guhan arrived at the meeting room of Taiyin Star Garrison early in the morning. However, when Jiyu Han arrived at the Sun Moon Star Guardian conference room half an hour before the scheduled time, there were only less than 1/10 of the famous sword-bearers in the entire conference room. When they saw Jiyu Han, these sword-bearers did not show much respect. They did not even nod to greet him, as if he was just an irrelevant passerby. This was completely different from when Jiyu Han had just arrived at the Sun Moon Star Guardian Palace 3 years ago. At that time, as the Guardian of Taiyin, Yaoguang's power was astonishing. No one dared to stand up to Yaoguang, and even dared to show such disrespect to Yaoguang. However, the attitude of the sword-bearers now was like heaven and earth. Why would such a situation occur? Jiyu Han was very clear in his heart. Ever since the shamans were chased deep into the mountains and forests, Mountain Sea Pass no longer needed to choose top-notch genius swordbearers to guard the place. The Mountain Sea Pass Management Committee's attitude in choosing the Guardians had changed to throwing the weakest swordbearers with famed swords who could not improve, who were just sitting around waiting for death, because Mountain Sea Pass had already turned from a dangerous place where the death rate was as high as 40% to a holiday spot where the death rate was less than 3%. The Mountain Sea Pass Management Committee only used the ranks of these swordbearers to maintain the existence of the Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. They did not need these swordbearers to fight. When Shanhai Pass had to fight constantly, powerful strength would become the guarantee of prestige. Only when you had powerful strength would those sword-bearers be willing to fight with you, because they believed that you could protect them. Therefore, those sword-bearers who had fought alongside Guhan for 1.5 years were very respectful towards Guhan, because they knew very well how terrifying and powerful Guhan's strength was. However, those sword-bearers who had not seen Guhan's strength before were useless sword-bearers. Their purpose of living in Shanhai Pass was to wait to die. Many of them had not even seen the face of Wu people, so they did not know how terrifying Guhan's strength was. In the propaganda of the Sword Committee, All the credit was given to Ying Zheng and Liuanian Ling, and Gu Han was just a sword-bearer who was occasionally mentioned. He was lucky enough to become brothers with Liuanian Ling and Ying Zheng, so he got some credit. Besides, because there was no need to fight, the title of Sun Yin Guard was more of an empty title. At the same time, it was only to maintain the existence of the Ju Tian Star battle formation. They were all sword-bearers with famous sword-bearers, so why should they show respect to him? On top of that, Gu Han had completely hidden behind the scenes for the next 1.5 years, so the people of Taiyin Garrison had forgotten about the existence of this Sun Yin Guard. In conclusion, it was reasonable for these new sword-bearers to have a disdainful attitude towards Gu Han. When the appointed time arrived, only less than 1/5 of the sword-bearers with famous sword-bearers had come to the meeting room. Gu Han knew that even if he waited any longer, these sword-bearers would not come. Well, it did not matter whether they came or not. As long as the successor of Taiyin Garrison was here, he could just hand over the Sun Yin Star Ju Tian Star's banner to him, and his mission would be completed. WN Shida, the heavy responsibility of Taiyin Garrison will be handed over to you, said a rather young sword-bearer sitting beside him. The reason why Gu Han handed the position of Sun Yin Guard to him was very simple. It was because he was the youngest among all the sword-bearers present. At the same time, he was also the new T-Star Guardian. Since the position of Sun Yin Guard had become insignificant, Gu Han willfully gave it to his successor in Shising Garrison. Thank you, Sir Gu Han. WN Shida excitedly pulled out his T-Star Great Ju Tian Star's banner and placed it on the table. At the same time, he held the new Sun Yin Star Great Ju Tian Star's banner in his hand, ready to take over the position of Sun Yin Star Guardian. After all, this was the position of Sun Yin Star's Guardian. Although this position was more of a symbolic thing after the Shanhai Pass Administrative Committee was reorganized and didn't have any actual power, it still sounded better than the title of T-Star Guardian. No one expected that in the future, the position of Sun Yin Star Guardian would be handed over to the T-Star Guardian. The Shising Garrison also leapt from being the worst garrison in Taiyin Garrison to becoming the Crown Prince of Taiyin Garrison. All the Sun Yin Star Guardians would be taken over by the T-Star Guardian. Gu Han couldn't be bothered to hold a succession ceremony. He directly pulled out his great Ju Tian Star's banner from his purple palace. Just as he was about to break it, something happened. A series of people suddenly walked in from the open door of the conference room. These people were almost all ordinary people, but they were all wearing the Shanhai Pass Administrative Committee's uniform. The person in the lead was a sword-bearer with a famous sword with the sign Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director. Wait. We can't hold a handover ceremony. The Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director shouted. The sudden turn of events jolted the absent-minded sword-bearers out of their stupor. They realized that the boring matter had become interesting, and immediately began to pay attention to what was about to happen next with great interest. What's wrong? Why can't I hold a handover ceremony? Gu Han frowned as he looked at the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director. The Shanghai Pass Management Committee and the Sword Committee have issued a joint order. Considering that famed sword-level sword wielder Comrade Jiyu Han has been meticulous in his work during his time as the Guardian of the Moonstar, his style of work is rigorous, he has managed the Moonguard Mansion in an orderly manner, and he has completed the task given to him by the Sword Committee. At the same time, in order to ensure the stability of the Ju Tian Star battle formation, we have decided to let Comrade Gu Han continue to be the Sun Yin Star Guardian and build the Taiyin Star Garrison to a better place. Speaking up to this point, the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee Executive Director gave a very annoying smile. Comrade Gu Han, congratulations. The Sword Committee and the people are very satisfied with your work. No one is willing to let you go. In that case, I have to thank the Sword Committee for their trust in me. Gu Han's tone sounded very calm, but even a fool could tell that there was a storm in it. Of course, you can continue to live a carefree life in the Shanhai Pass. This is of course a good thing. It is also a sign of the Sword Committee's trust in you. Times are different now. There are countless sword bearers who want to enter Shanhai Pass, but the Sword Committee does not approve them. This was true. Shanghai Pass was indeed a place that everyone yearned for. How long do I have to stay here? Guhan asked again. At least for another 3 years, the executive director said with a smile. If you think it's not enough, another 6 or 9 years is not out of the question. This is Ying Zheng's idea. Or is it the idea of those bastards in Yuzhang City? Or is it the idea of the Liu Nian family? Guhan asked out of the blue. How would I know who you've offended? The executive director blurted out the truth in a moment of confusion. Shanghai Pass was the best place for those sword-bearers who wanted to retire. There was no danger here, and they could earn a very generous salary. There was no better place in the world to retire than here. However, for those sword-bearers who were determined to improve themselves, this place was a dead end. The shaman tribe would not provide sword essence to the sword-bearers. Forget about staying for 3 years, even if the sword-bearers stayed here for 30 years, they would not be able to increase their sword essence. This place was equivalent to a place that would forever seal the sword-bearers and prevent them from increasing their sword essence. No sword-bearer with any fighting spirit would be willing to stay in Mountain Sea Pass. Therefore, when Guhan heard that the Sword Committee had ordered him to stay in Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, Guhan could not suppress his anger. Back then, when Liuonian Ling, Ku Rokin, and Leslie Dracula were all transferred away, but Guhan was not. Guhan had already guessed that someone was deliberately trying to suppress him in Shanghai Pass. However, at that time, Guhan wanted to heal the internal injuries in his body, and at the same time, to better understand his swordsmanship, so he did not resist. However, he did not expect the mastermind to be so shameless. They actually wanted to suppress him for another 3 years. Ji Yuhan could say without a doubt that if he really stayed in Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, he would still be forced to stay there for another 3 years. These people wanted to use Shanghai Pass as a cage, trapping him in Shanghai Pass forever. Guhan said coldly, since the establishment of Shanghai Pass, there has never been a case where sword-bearers are required to stay in Shanghai Pass after 3 years. Every sword-bearer only needs to stay in Shanghai Pass for 3 years. This is written in the rules of Shanghai Pass. Did the Sword Committee forget about this? The rules can be changed. The executive director said impatiently, I forgot to tell you that the rules have been changed. Now, as long as the Sword Committee feels that it is necessary, they can request sword-bearers to stay in Shanghai Pass. Therefore, the rule of having to leave after 3 years is no longer effective. You have to stay in Shanghai Pass. If you don't want to be the guardian of the lunar star, you can be the guardian of the Sh*T star. Anyway, you will be leaving from here. What if I refuse? Guhan suppressed his anger. Then I'm sorry. There is no shortage of positions in the prison of the disciplinary committee. The executive director scolded in disdain. In his eyes, would any sword-bearer dare to resist the authority of the disciplinary committee? Chapter 1053. I can't be bothered to waste my time with you. Without another word, Guhan snapped the Sun Ju Tian Star's star banner in his hand and swaggered towards the door of the meeting room. He couldn't be bothered with the executive director of the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee anymore. Ji Yu. How dare you? The executive director of the Shanghai Pass Administrative Committee took out his sword lady and was about to release it to attack Guhan. However, he held the sword lady in his hand for a long time, but it didn't move at all. It seemed like it had no intention of releasing it. Young man, this is Shanghai Pass. Without the great Ju Tian Star's star banner, you are just an ordinary person. Don't count on your sword lady, a white-haired famed sword-rank swordsman sitting beside the executive director said calmly. The executive director suddenly remembered that he couldn't use the star power in the great Ju Tian Star's star banner without the help of the Ju Tian Star's star banner. Moreover, the sword essence in his body was completely suppressed by the great Ju Tian Star's star battle formation. Therefore, it was impossible for him to release his sword lady. The executive director wasn't completely blind or deaf. He had vaguely heard some of his friends talking about Guhan. He knew that Guhan was a sword master. Without the help of the sword lady, he was afraid that he wouldn't be a match for Guhan. You guys, hurry up and capture him. Therefore, The executive director immediately ordered the few famed sword-rank swordsmen sitting beside him. These famed sword-rank swordsmen were the guardians of the Ju Tian Star's star battle formation. They could use the power of their sword lady. Now that Guhan had lost his great Ju Tian Star's star banner, he was no match for these guardians. Therefore, the executive director immediately ordered them. TSK. Unexpectedly, these famed sword-rank swordsmen rolled their eyes and pretended that they didn't hear the executive director's words. They continued to sit quietly in their chairs with their eyes closed. What are you doing? Seeing Guhan's figure gradually disappear from his sight, the executive director became anxious and shouted that Guhan openly disobeyed the order of the Sword Committee. We must arrest him and bring him to the Discipline Commission for discipline inspection and let the law judge him. The headquarters of the Sword Committee gave you an order, but not us. The white-haired famed swordsman sneered. How about this? Let's get an order from the Sword Council first, then we'll go and capture him. You. The executive director was infuriated by the swordsman. Putting aside the fact that he did not have the ability to get an order from the Sword Commission, even if he did, he was afraid that Guhan would have left Shanghai Pass by then. Young man, don't blame us for not helping you. This time, the Sword Committee has really gone too far. He's a young expert, different from us retired people. You guys actually trapped him here for another 3 years. Do you guys still have any humanity left? What's more, trapping a potential famed swordsman like this, what are your Sword Committee's intentions? Could it be that the core purpose of the Sword Committee is not to protect and help every swordsman to grow? Could it be that the Sword Committee has become a place where people fight for power and profit, where they will do anything to harm their enemies? This old man feels that the smell of the Sword Committee has become more and more strange in the past 2 years. It's really unlucky. An even older famed sword-level swordbearer could not help but speak up. This swordbearer's words could be said to have pierced through the heart. He spoke the truth, and it also caused the executive director's face to turn pale. All right, old shoe, these young people do not listen to us old people. Another old swordsman waved his hand and said to the executive director, you definitely can't command us. If you want to capture him, then you have to do it yourself. Do you see the big Ju Tian Star Time banner on the table? As long as you integrate it into your purple palace, you will be able to regain control of the sword lady. What you want to do is up to you. We won't accompany you. After saying that, these old swordsmen left the conference room, including WN Shida. After hesitating for a while, he also left the conference room, leaving only the executive director and the big Ju Tian Star Time banner on the table. I'm just temporary. Once I capture that Guhan, I will be free. What's the big deal? Thinking so, the executive director directly inserted the great heavenly cycle star banner into his zifu. After waiting for a minute or two, his eyes suddenly emitted a bright light, and he once again pulled out his sword Maiden, successfully releasing her from the zifu. Whirling light sword, let's go. With his sword lady by his side, the executive director immediately chased after the direction that Guhan had left. When Guhan finished packing his things and came out of the room, he saw the executive director blocking his way. Beside him, there was a dull and lifeless sword lady. Obviously, this sword lady was not a natural sword lady, but a man-made one. Guhan, it's too late for you to regret now. I'm going to escort you to the Discipline Commission for discipline inspection and let the law judge you, the executive director said righteously. With just you. Guhan coldly snorted, let those old farts from Yuzhong City come here, or let Ying Zheng come here himself. As for you, you are still too inexperienced. Arrogant. Continue to be arrogant. The executive director also sneered, you may be really strong, but that was when you were the Lunar Guardian. You really shouldn't have broken the big Ju Tian Star Time banner of the Lunar Star. Right now, you are just an ordinary person. I really don't know where you get the courage to be so arrogant. Light Whirlwind, hurry up and capture him. It doesn't matter if he gets injured, just don't kill him. The executive director's sword lady, Light Whirlwind, listened to its sword wielder's order and immediately slashed at Guhan's arm without saying a word. According to the executive director's plan, Guhan could no longer use his sword essence, so he could not form a close-fitting shield around his body. This way, light whirlwind could easily attack Guhan's arm. As long as it crippled one of Guhan's arms, Guhan would realize how stupid he was. Unfortunately, the following development was completely out of the executive director's expectations. The executive director clearly saw light whirlwind's sword about to cut Guhan's arm, but his vision suddenly blurred. Before he could see clearly what had happened, the sword in light whirlwind's hand had already left light whirlwind's hand and was instead held in Guhan's hand. My sword. Although light whirlwind did not have high intelligence and did not have much spirituality, its most important sword had been snatched away. Light whirlwind's face revealed an expression of disbelief. Just like her sword wielder, she had no idea what had just happened. Her sword had already been snatched away by Guhan. The sword lady's sword is used to deal with enemies, not our own people. Guhan looked at the light whirlwind in his hand with a gloomy expression, then said to the executive director, "How dare you use your sword against me? Since when did the Sword Commission headquarters authorize sword wielder to use their swords against their own comrades? You violated the Sword Commission headquarters orders and openly resisted arrest." "Can't I arrest you?" the executive director said matter-of-factly. "Have you memorized the sword wielder management regulations and sword wielder criminal procedures? Unless the sword wielder has committed an extremely vile crime of killing humans or harming comrades, only then will the relevant personnel be able to arrest and control the sword wielder without the disciplinary committee's approval." Guhan said coldly, "Other than that, you must have an arrest warrant from the disciplinary committee before you have the right to make a move against me. Have you forgotten all these rules? Don't try to escape punishment." The executive director immediately replied, "Of course I remember these rules. However, when I came out, the higher-ups specifically told me that if anyone dares to refuse the Sword Commission headquarters orders, then this person will be considered to have committed an extremely vile crime. They can arrest the person immediately without asking for permission. Guhan, you'd better surrender now, lest your crimes become even more serious. Idiot. You don't even know that you've been used as a weapon." Guhan casually tossed out the light rotation sword. The executive director only felt a cold wind blow past his crotch before the light rotation sword was tossed out from between his legs by Guhan. It stabbed deep into the ground, leaving only the sword hilt exposed. At that moment, the executive director's little brother suddenly felt a cool breeze blowing on his body. He immediately lowered his head and realized that his pants and underwear had been sliced apart by the sword. It was as if the executive director was wearing a pair of open-crotch pants. It was no wonder the cool breeze was blowing on his little brother's body. If this sword had moved a little higher, it would have. The executive director suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. If the solid cold had moved a little higher, his little brother would have been in danger. What terrifying swordsmanship! The executive director recalled how Fang Xingjian had easily snatched the light rotation sword from Empress Light Rotation's hands. He also understood that the difference between them was no longer just 1 or 2 levels. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. This Guhan is actually so powerful. The executive director remained rooted to the spot, muttering to himself in confusion. This powerful sword wielder. What kind of mistake did the Sword Committee headquarters make? Why did they insist on keeping him in Shanghai Pass? Was it really as those old fogies said? Was someone trying to ruin his life? If such a powerful sword wielder was allowed to continue growing, he would definitely become a mainstay of humanity in the future. He might even become a spirit sword or immortal sword wielder. Could it be that the Sword Committee headquarters has really changed? They're willing to destroy the interests of all humanity for the sake of a few? That's right. That old fogey was right. The Sword Committee headquarters doesn't feel like the Sword Committee headquarters of the past anymore. The Sword Committee headquarters of the past would definitely not do something like this. The executive director, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, immediately became dispirited. Be careful. The executive director suddenly thought of something and immediately shouted to Guhan, I didn't come alone. There's probably someone waiting for you outside. You must be careful. Got it. Thank you, comrade. Guhan waved his hand from afar, then directly boarded his droplet flying car and headed towards the Shanghai Pass's city gates. The best way to deal with an enemy was not to defeat them, but to make them submit to you wholeheartedly. Chapter 1054. 10 minutes later, Ji Yuhan arrived at the gate tower of Shanghai Pass at full speed in the droplet flying car. 3 years ago, Ji Yuhan had entered Shanghai Pass through this gate tower. 3 years later, he would leave Shanghai Pass through this gate tower as well. According to the standard procedure, Ji Yuhan should go through the gate tower to leave Shanghai Pass before leaving Shanghai Pass. However, after what had just happened, Ji Yuhan could not be bothered to go through the proper procedures. He directly leaped onto the walls of the Shanghai Pass, and with another jump, he successfully left the heavenly cycle star formation that had trapped him for 3 years. The moment Guhan came into contact with the outside air, the sword essences that he could not sense previously returned to his control. However, the sword essences did not recover immediately. Instead, they recovered slowly like an hourglass. This was the side effect of staying in Shanghai Pass for 3 years. Although Guhan could use his sword essences during his 3 years in Shanghai Pass, he could only use the Great Ju Tian Star flag to convert the sword essences in his body into the power of the stars. Then, he could use the power of the stars to fight. Therefore, this was only an indirect way of using the sword essences. In fact, Ji Yuhan had not been able to control the real sword essences for 3 years. Therefore, the sword essences could not return to Ji Yuhan's control immediately. He had to gradually regain control over them through a gradual process. Ji Yuhan roughly estimated that he could regain control of about 10 quarks of sword essences per second, which was 600 quarks per minute, and 36,000 quarks per hour. It would take about 13 hours for all the 460,000 quarks of sword essences in Ji Yuhan's body to be completely recovered. This was nothing for most sword bearers. They only needed to wait for 13 hours. They would slowly recover the sword essences in their bodies under the protection of the Shanghai Pass Management Committee. However, Guhan did not seem to receive such good treatment. When Ji Yuhan jumped off the wall of Shanghai Pass, he saw an old friend floating in the air looking at him. Sword Spirit of Gui Hall. Long time no see. The person hovering in the air waiting for him was none other than the Sword Spirit of Gui Hall who had sent Ji Yuhan to Shanghai Pass 3 years ago. After not seeing him for 3 years, the Sword Spirit's aura had become even gloomier, and his strength had naturally increased as well. According to Ji Yuhan's observations, this Sword Spirit's sword essence should have broken through 1,000,000 quarks, reaching the minimum standard of a celestial sword wielder. As long as he found a celestial sword wielder who was willing to synchronize with him, the sword spirit would probably become a celestial sword wielder in one leap. Long time no see. There were no stairs under the sword spirit's feet. However, the sword spirit still walked down from the sky as if he was walking down a flight of stairs. Finally, he stood firmly on the ground. What's wrong? Are you here to welcome me? Ji Yuhan asked the sword spirit with a smile. Can't I? The sword spirit waved his hand, and a table and 2 chairs were placed on the ground in front of Shanghai Pass. There was also a bottle of wine with a blurred label on the table. It's a Beijing Erguitu produced on the 23rd of March, 2017. You have no idea how much effort it took me to get this wine. Are you interested in having a few drinks with me? The sword spirit of Gui Hall asked Ji Yuhan with interest. A fine wine from 1,000 years ago. Ji Yuhan looked carefully at the bottle of Erguitu, whose label could no longer be seen. I heard that this Erguitu is worth 100,000 yuan just by smelling it, and 70 million yuan just by drinking it. Are you really willing to let me drink such a fine wine? Whether it's a good wine or not has nothing to do with the wine itself, but the person drinking it, the sword spirit said coldly. The sword spirit of Gui Hall said coldly, even some sword immortals don't cooperate with my Erguitu. However, I'm worried that it's not good enough for you, Ji Yuhan. Interesting. Ji Yuhan smiled and sat down on his seat. He deftly twisted off the cap of the precious 1,000-year-old Erguitu and poured himself a full cup. He placed it in front of his nose and sniffed it. He exclaimed, "This is really good wine. I feel refreshed just by smelling it." Of course, The sword spirit smiled and filled his glass as well. He then raised his glass to Ji Han and said, "Brother Guhan, a toast to you." "Sure." Ji Han clinked his glass with the sword spirit and drank the wine in one gulp. "Great wine. I've never tasted such fine wine before." Ji Han couldn't help but exclaim, "Brother Gui Dian, I have a favor to ask. I have a sword mistress who loves wine. I wonder if I could ask her to come out and have a taste of this wine." "Brother Guhan, you must be talking about Lady Yi." The sword spirit nodded. Lady Yi is extremely righteous and she was Kanzu's sword mistress back then. "How could I not agree? Thanks a lot then." Ji Han thanked him and released Heavenly Sword right away. The moment Yi Tian was released, it sniffed with its delicate nose and immediately discovered the fragrance of wine in the air. Its eyes immediately lit up as it stared at the bottle of erguatu in front of it. Without saying a word, it hid the bottle in its arms and looked at Ji Han and the sword spirit cautiously. "This bottle of wine is mine. None of you are allowed to snatch it from me. Brother Gui Dian, please forgive Yi Tian. She gets carried away whenever she sees wine. Please be understanding," Ji Han said with a smile. "It's fine." Before the sword spirit could finish his sentence, Yi Tian raised the bottle and poured the erguatu into her stomach. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the erguatu was gone. "Ever since I left Zhetian, I don't know how many years it's been since I've tasted such pure erguatu. It must be the erguatu produced by the old factory. Only the old factory's wine cellar can produce such a taste." Yi Tian praised. Ji Han had never seen Yi Tian praise a bottle of wine like that. "Lady Yi Tian, don't be in such a hurry. Drink slowly." Even the sword spirit of the Sai Hall could not help but twitch when he saw the fine wine he had kept for a long time being drunk by a single person. He looked pained. Yi Tian probably felt that it was too wasteful to drink like that, so she snatched the glass in front of Ji Han and carefully poured half a glass of erguatu. She first brought it to her nose and sniffed it with all her might. After fully experiencing the fragrance of the erguatu, she sipped it mouthful by mouthful. It was a stark contrast to how she had gulped it down like a wolf. "For Yi Tian to drink so carefully, this bottle of wine of yours must be one of the best in the world," Ji Han said as he rubbed his nose. Ji Han said as he touched his nose, "I appreciate the kindness of this bottle of wine. Tell me, Brother Ming, why did you come all the way here to greet me and spend such an expensive bottle of wine on me? Brother Ming, what are you here for? Our relationship isn't that good, is it? You must be joking, Brother Ji Han. The relationship between people is always unpredictable. 1 second, you're an enemy. The next, you'll become a friend for life and death." "The same is true," the sword spirit said. The sword spirit of Gui Hall said in a deep voice, "Whether Brother Ji Han and I are enemies or friends depends on your decision." "Oh, I wonder what's wrong with this momentary lapse in judgment?" Ji Han asked back with interest. "Brother Ji Han, if you return to Shanghai Pass for another 3 years, we'll be best friends in the world. Otherwise, the two of us will be enemies," the sword spirit said calmly. "I see." Ji Han smiled in disdain. "I thought you were different from the others. I didn't expect you to be in cahoots with them. Don't forget that you sent me to Shanghai Pass 3 years ago. I've been here for 3 years. What else do you want? You can stay for another 3 years. Didn't I stay in there for 6 years to achieve what I have today?" The sword spirit of Gui Palace played with the wine glass in his hand. "Let's go back. 3 years is enough. I promise that no one will stop you from coming out after 3 years. How about this? Are you representing yourself? Or do you represent your father?" Ji Han did not answer the sword spirit's question directly. Instead, he asked a different question. "What do I mean? What do you mean, my father?" The sword spirit asked. "Didn't you say that enemies and friends are separated by a single thought?" Ji Han chuckled. "If that's what your father wants, then I've made a great opponent. If that's what you want, then I'm sorry, but you're not worthy to be my opponent, Guhan. You." The sword spirit was so agitated by Ji Han's words that he could not help but jump. "How arrogant. There's no opponent in this world that I, the sword spirit, can't be. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but the fact that you're waiting for me here means that you know you're not my opponent. Guhan looked at the Sword Lady's great sheer dragonfinch in the Sword Spirit's hand and said, "If you think you're qualified to be my opponent, drink with me for an hour. After an hour, I'll admit that you're qualified to be my opponent." Hee. As expected of Ji Han and the military governor. I'm speechless. The Sword Spirit let out a long sigh. Others might not know your abilities, but I know them very well. You're right, I'm not your opponent when you're at your peak, and I can't give you an hour to recover your sword essence. Today, let me, your unworthy enemy, send you back. After saying that, the Sword Spirit tossed the Sword Lady Aqua Dragon Sparrow into the air. Then, the Sword Lady Aqua Dragon Sparrow landed heavily on the ground, causing a huge tremor. I won't bully you. As long as you're capable of defeating the Great Sheer Dragonfinch, I won't meddle in this anymore. The Sword Spirit took a step back and left the battlefield to the Great Sheer Dragonfinch. Yi Tian, it's time to end our feud. The Great Sheer Dragonfinch slammed the giant sword in her hand onto the ground, causing a violent shockwave that shattered the entire table. Fortunately, Ji Han's eyes and hands were sharp, and he managed to grab that precious bottle of erguatu into his hands. Give me the wine. The Yi Tian was completely focused on the erguatu and did not care about the Great Sheer Dragonfinch at the side. What's the hurry? I won't snatch the wine from you. Guhan pouted at the Great Sheer Dragonfinch. Let's defeat your old enemy first. I can't wait to have sex with you. Chapter 1055. Yi Tian frowned and said to the water dragon Sparrow, "Sparrow, you know better than me what happened back then. I didn't do anything. It was all that guy's wishful thinking. Why do you have to vent your anger on me and keep pestering me? Mph, if it wasn't for you, how could Yi Jiqiu not like me? How could he not marry for his entire life and not even touch a single woman? It's all because of you, bitch." The deep-water dragon Sparrow said angrily. There was important information in her words. After Ji Han had become the Sword Pavilion Master, he had specially looked through the records of the Sword Pavilion. He discovered that the second sword-bearer of the Heavenly Sword, which was also the previous sword-bearer, came from a sword-bearer from 300 years ago called Yi Jiqiu. In the end, this sword-bearer became a spirit sword-bearer. However, he died at an early age, dying before the age of 50. Otherwise, this Yi Jiqiu could very well have become an immortal sword-bearer. The deep-water dragon Sparrow happened to be Yi Jiqiu's sword mistress. With this information, Ji Han could easily guess what had happened back then. Yi Jiqiu had fallen in love with Yi Tian, but Yi Tian did not like Yi Jiqiu. On the contrary, Yi Jiqiu's sword mistress, the deep-water dragon Sparrow, had fallen in love with Yi Jiqiu. However, it seemed that Yi Jiqiu was deeply in love with Yi Tian. When he could not get Yi Tian's love, he chose not to marry or touch any woman. That was why the deep-water dragon Sparrow hated Yi Tian so much. However, according to some of the other records that Ji Han had discovered, Yi Jiqiu seemed to have completely fallen out with Yi Tian at the final juncture of his life. For a whole 5 years, he had sealed Yi Tian in his scabbard, not releasing it even once. As for what exactly happened, no one knew. While Guhan was curious about the gossip, the battle on the other side had already begun. Today, I will break every bone in your body. I will destroy all your pride and self-esteem. After saying that, the deep-water dragon Sparrow dashed towards Yi Tian with the giant sword in her hand. After so many years, your swordsmanship is still so smelly. You haven't improved at all. Yi Tian shook his head in disdain as he watched the deep-water dragon Sparrow's attack. Clearly, he was not impressed by the deep-water dragon Sparrow's swordsmanship. I only need to flick you lightly, and you'll be sent flying, Yi Tian said indifferently. Then, he gently flicked the heavenly sword towards a certain point on the deep-water dragon Sparrow sword. Ironically, the one who flew out in the end was not someone else, but Yi Tian himself. Yi Tian's entire body flew out and crashed heavily into a large tree, breaking the entire tree. From this, one could see just how powerful the deep-water dragon Sparrow sword was. Keep pretending. If you, Yi Tian, have the ability to act tough again. Seeing Yi Tian fly out, The deep-water dragon sparrow immediately felt proud and provoked Yi Tian proudly. "Guhan, where's your sword essence? Why is your sword essence so little? Why did I use up all of it just by using a bit of strength?" Yi Tian, whose bones were numb from the impact, questioned Ji Yu Han angrily. "There's nothing I can do about that." Ji Yu Han shrugged. "Yi Tian, you've seen it for yourself. Someone shamelessly fought with me a few minutes after I left Shanhai Pass. I only have less than 2,000 quarks of sword essence in my body now. I've already given you all of these 2,000 quarks of sword essence just now. I don't have any more left. Then how much more sword essence do you have for me to use?" Yi Tian immediately asked in shock. "From now on, I can only provide you with 10 quarks of sword essence at most every second. You'd better make good use of it and not waste it," Ji Yu Han said with a chuckle. "Are you kidding me? 10 quarks of sword essence every second? Even if I'm an Emperor Sword Lady, I can't beat that B*TCH Sparrowhead." Yi Tian looked like she could not accept this. "Why don't I do it?" Ji Yu Han said calmly. "But if that's the case, you have to give me half of this erguatu. Dream on." Yi Tian stomped her feet in anger. "Watch closely. I'll use my true strength to deal with this sparrowhead." After saying that, Yi Tian flew out from the broken bushes and took the initiative to fight with the water-sunken dragon sparrow. However, the heavenly sword's actions were like throwing an egg at a rock. In just a few seconds, the heavenly sword was once again sent flying by the water dragon sparrow. This time, the heavenly sword directly crashed into the city wall of Shanhai Pass, causing the entire wall to shake. "Yi Tian, looks like your new master is too useless. He can't even provide you with a little bit of sword essence, making you so fragile. Why don't I send you back to the furnace to be reforged?" The sunken dragon sparrow laughed maniacally and charged towards Yi Tian on the wall like a missile. "Sparrowhead. I've always looked down on humans, but I have to say this. Guhan isn't someone A**TCH like you can bully." Yi Tian's eye kicked hard on the city wall and flew in another direction, narrowly dodging the attack of the deep-water dragon sparrow. "You can't escape." The sunken dragon sparrow immediately chased after Yi Tian. After fighting for a while in the air, Yi Tian was sent flying by the sunken dragon sparrow for the 3rd time. 3 times, 5 times, 20 times, 50 times. The following battles were just like the previous ones. Although Yi Tian was still fearlessly fighting with the sunken dragon sparrow, she would be sent flying by the sunken dragon sparrow in less than 10 seconds. She was completely beaten up by the sunken dragon sparrow. Hence, the aqua dragon sparrow was extremely excited. It was not that she had never fought with Heaven's Sword before, but because they were both sword-bearers, and a sword-bearer could only provide sword essences to a sword lady in a liberated state, they could not use sword essences during the battle, and could only use swordsmanship. This was naturally a piece of cake for the heavenly sword, which was known as the best swordsman and one of the top 3 famous swords. Every time the sunken dragon sparrow was humiliated by Yi Tian's swordsmanship. Of course, in Yi Tian's eyes, this was a form of education. Therefore, at this moment, when the sunken dragon sparrow kept sending Yi Tian flying, the feeling of humiliation that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time was completely released. What replaced it was a strong sense of pleasure from revenge. The sunken dragon sparrow's brain was so dazed that she did not notice that the truth might not be as beautiful as what she saw. Compared to the dazed sunken dragon sparrow, her sword holder, the sword spirit of Ming Palace, was much calmer. He soon discovered that although the sunken dragon sparrow was at an absolute advantage, Yi Tian was not seriously injured. The energy of the sunken dragon sparrow's shield was always within the 60% safety line, while the energy of the sunken dragon sparrow's shield was decreasing at a slow and even rate. It would soon fall below the 60% safety line. Why is this happening? The sword spirit of Ming Palace was deeply confused. The sunken dragon sparrow was clearly suppressing Yi Tian, and Yi Tian was also the one being sent flying and smashing into various things. If he was in Yi Tian's place, and he was only given 10 quarks of sword essence per second to use, the sword spirit of Ming Palace would have no doubt that his shield would be broken by the sunken dragon sparrow within 2 strikes, and he would become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. No. There's a problem here, I can't let the sunken dragon sparrow continue playing around. I have to make her use her ultimate move. The sword spirit of Ming Palace immediately ordered the sunken dragon sparrow to use her ultimate move. Wall of Unity. Back then, the creator of the sunken dragon sparrow, Helion Bobo, had decided to build the strongest city in the world, which was the Wall of Unity. Therefore, King Helion Bobo recruited 100,000 people to build the Wall of Unity, and each craftsman was responsible for a section of the wall. After the wall was built, the craftsman would hit it with a sharp awl. If the awl penetrated an inch deep into the wall, the entire family of the craftsman would be beheaded. Therefore, every craftsman in the construction of the Wall of Unity did not dare to slack off at all. After killing tens of thousands of craftsmen and their families, the Wall of Unity was finally built. The Wall of Unity became the strongest city in Huaxia after it was built. The Wall of Unity, the unique skill of the deepwater dragon sparrow, came from this. When the deepwater dragon sparrow used the Wall of Unity, a circular city wall would appear and trap the enemy inside. The deepwater dragon sparrow, whether the enemy could fly or travel through the void, the enemy would be firmly trapped inside before the Wall of Unity was that something was wrong. Therefore, he seemed to have hit the wall, and also had another name he had used as a cushion, was nowhere to be seen. This meant that even an immortal sword maiden would feel worried when she saw the Wall of Myriad Unity like this, because she could not escape through the void within the Wall of Myriad Unity. But you refused. More importantly, why bother? When the sunken dragon sparrow was inside the Wall of Unity, the Wall of Unity could increase the sunken dragon sparrow's attack power standing behind her with a smile, making the already extraordinary sunken dragon sparrow's attack even more terrifying. Asked in shock. Whatever you say. She had clearly placed the sunken dragon sparrow wanted to continue enjoying the pleasure of knocking the heaven sword in the blink of an eye. The sword spirit of the Gooey Palace had issued an order. The sunken dragon sparrow had no choice but it's enough to deal with the spirit of the Gooey Palace and use its ultimate move, with a mocking smile. You, Heaven's Sword, the deepwater dragon sparrow, was instantly enraged, but he is no longer here to protect you now, and was ready to attack the sunken dragon sparrow shouted. You'd better look at your radius of around 1 kilometer. Do you really think you have the upper hand? Surrounding the Heaven's Sword and the sunken dragon sparrow. Only then did the deepwater dragon sparrow notice using the strength of 10,000 now. It was horrified to find that its shield strength was less than its old opponent, like the back of its hand. How did this happen? Of course, the deepwater dragon sparrow could not believe her after the Wall of Unity appeared. She had no idea how her personal shield had been reduced to less than 30%. Did not waste any more time. However, her opponent, she directly ran into the Heaven's Sword and sent its sword elements. However, had about 50% of the sunken dragon sparrow did not let the Heaven's Sword fly away. All the damage in the wall of everything ignores it flew along with the Heaven's Sword. In other words, it wanted to give the Heaven's Sword a final blow the moment the Heaven's Sword crashed into the wall. You must have been hurt badly. The situation seemed quite dangerous, right? The Heaven's Sword was in your body hurt badly. Yi Tian's words were like a sharp knife stabbing into the deepwater dragon sparrow's heart. The deepwater dragon sparrow, who was feeling very satisfied just now, was instantly filled with shame and anger. She roared and continued to attack Yi Tian like a madman. Sigh, after fighting for so long, I've finally saved up some green plum wine. Yi Tian sighed and drank all the green plum wine in the gourd in one gulp. He summoned his claw, Huang Feijian, and transformed into his dazzling divine general form. Sparrowhead, you just let me have a taste of your ultimate move, now it's time for me to let you have a taste of my ultimate move. Yi Tian, who was in the state of immortal general, let out a playful laugh. In the blink of an eye, he had engaged in a fierce battle with the deepwater dragon sparrow. However, this time, Yi Tian was not sent flying. Instead, he was in a stalemate with the deepwater dragon sparrow. To put it nicely, the moves of the deepwater dragon sparrow were grand and magnificent. To put it bluntly, it was a simple move that relied purely on one's immense strength to attack. There was no technique to speak of. On the other hand, Yi Tian's swordsmanship was the other extreme. He displayed his swordsmanship to the extreme. The sky was filled with Yi Tian's sword light. The deepwater dragon sparrow would often have to use its shield to take dozens of attacks from Yi Tian when it tried to block one sword strike. Although the sword spirit of Gooey Palace could block the attacks with a massive amount of sword essence, all of Yi Tian's attacks in the state of immortal general ignored defense. Therefore, the strength of the deepwater dragon sparrow's shield was declining rapidly. On the other hand, Yi Tian's shield was not damaged at all. This meant that the deep-water dragon sparrow had not attacked Yi Tian at all. It's time to end this. It's slower than I expected. Gu Han watched the battle with a slightly disappointed expression. On the other side, the sword spirit of Gui Palace looked terrible, as if his mother had just died. Oh no. The sword spirit of Gui Palace's expression stiffened. He already knew that his deep-water dragon sparrow was likely to lose. Boom. The wall of Thousand Worlds suddenly made a loud noise. Just as abruptly as it had appeared, it disappeared just as abruptly, leaving behind a pile of debris on the ground and a cloud of dust that covered the entire battlefield. You've lost. After the dust settled, the outcome of the battle had already been determined. Just as Gu Han and the sword spirit of Gui Palace had predicted, the deep-water dragon sparrow's shield had already been destroyed. Yi Tian's heavenly sword was already on the deep-water dragon sparrow's neck. The outcome of the battle was obvious. I've lost. The deep-water dragon sparrow dropped the giant sword in her hand helplessly. Right now, she was filled with a sense of defeat. She had the advantage of more than 1,000,000 sword essences, yet she had still lost to her old enemy. This was a blow that she could not accept. You've changed. You've become stronger than before. The deep-water dragon sparrow calmed down and began to recall the battle. She recalled how she had lost. From the beginning of the battle, she had completely suppressed Yi Tian. Yi Tian had been sent flying by her over and over again, and she had thought that victory was in her grasp. However, after thinking about it carefully, she realized that although Yi Tian had indeed been sent flying, it seemed more like she had done it on purpose. She had been sent flying to nullify her powerful attack, then diverted it to the trees, the walls, and the soil. In any case, she had diverted the attack to something else. She did not receive any actual damage, which was why Yi Tian's shield did not suffer too much damage even after such a violent attack. On the contrary, Yi Tian kept swinging her heavenly sword at herself as she was sent flying again and again. The sword spirit did not care about these attacks at all because of her rich sword essences, and did not notice that her shield was actually weakening at an extremely fast rate. In that final clash, Yi Tian, who was in her divine general state, had used her swordsmanship to its limit. In front of her swordsmanship, the water-sink dragon sparrow's swordsmanship was as childish and laughable as a baby's. All it could do was punch its opponent's chest with its little fists, while the opponent was pointing a machine gun at its temple. After understanding this, the deep-water dragon sparrow felt even more hopeless. The swordsmanship that Yi Tian had displayed just now was something that the deep-water dragon sparrow had never seen before 350 years ago. Although Yi Tian's swordsmanship from 350 years ago was also terrifyingly powerful, it was still within the deep-water dragon sparrow's understanding. The deep-water dragon sparrow could still understand Yi Tian's swordsmanship. Simply put, Yi Tian and the deep-water dragon sparrow were still in the same category. The difference between them was like the difference between an emperor and a beggar. But now, the difference between them was like the difference between a beggar and the Jade Emperor. The difference had exceeded the limits of humans. One was in the sky, while the other was on the ground. Yi Tian's improvement over the past 350 years was terrifying, but the deep-water dragon sparrow was still at the same place, dreaming of revenge. It was just too ridiculous. Your swordsmanship is probably much more terrifying than recondite iron heavy sword swordsmanship now. What exactly have you been through over the past 350 years? Have you been practicing your swordsmanship for the past 350 years? After experiencing the huge difference between them, the deep-water dragon sparrow suddenly realized that her hatred for Yi Tian had lessened. No. Since you've been paying so much attention to me, don't you know that I've been sleeping in the sword tower for the past 350 years? Yi Tian yawned. Then how did you practice your swordsmanship? How did you become so terrifying in just 3 years? The deep-water dragon sparrow asked in confusion. It hasn't been 3 years. It's only been 1.5 years. Yi Tian looked at Gu Han as she spoke to this point. She looked at the smiling man and said in a bitter yet sweet tone, "If you've been trained by that guy for 1.5 years, I guarantee that you'll be much more powerful than I was 350 years ago." That guy with recondite iron heavy sword will no longer be the best swordsmanship on the famous sword level. It turned out that Guhan had not been idle during the 1.5 years he had been recuperating. He had spent most of his time training his sword ladies. However, the effect of training varied from person to person. Among them, Etienne was the sword lady who had improved the fastest. After all, Etienne had the highest talent in swordsmanship. She had even learned most of the chaos sword technique that Guhan had created. Next were Juzi and Duiu. Both of them were sword ladies who were talented and willing to work hard, so their improvement was obvious. Next would be Chidian and Shishui. These two belonged to the category of sword maidens who had terrible talent in swordsmanship but were willing to endure hardships. Shishui had to be praised here. As a sword maiden who had transformed from a human, her swordsmanship foundation was basically zero, but now she could be compared to Chidian. As for the worst one, of course, it was the poor sword. She almost angered Ji Han to death. Although she was talented, she was lazy and greedy to the extreme. She had so many ways to slack off that even Ji Han felt dizzy. She was the sword maiden that Ji Han spent the most time and effort on, but the results were the worst. I can't believe you would show such an expression for a man. Looking at Yi Tian's sweet expression, the deep-water dragon sparrow suddenly felt that some things were so ridiculous. I thought you would never fall in love with any man. If Yi Jiqiu saw this, he would definitely die of anger. If he dies, then he dies. Who cares about him? Yi Tian shrugged and put away the heavenly sword that was on the deep-water dragon sparrow's neck. Why? Don't you want to break all my bones? The deep-water dragon sparrow asked guiltily as she recalled her bold words. Why would I break your bones? I'm only interested in wine. I'm not interested in your bones. Yi Tian walked back to Guhan lazily. She stuck out her tongue and said, Where's my precious erguatu? Give it to me. Sigh, I want to have a sip too. The deep-water dragon sparrow shook her head bitterly. She turned into a ray of sword light and returned to the sword spirit scabbard. She was too ashamed to come out and could only numb herself with wine. Hee. I didn't expect Lady Yi Tian's swordsmanship to have improved to such an extraordinary level. I'll leave you alone, brother Guhan. The sword spirit smiled bitterly and cupped his fists at Guhan. He was about to leave. Wait. Guhan said slowly as he placed the erguatu in Yi Tian's hands. Did I say you could leave? Do those idiots really think that I, Guhan, am a nice person that they can do whatever they want without getting angry at? Sword spirit of the Gui Palace, can I borrow your clothes? Chapter 1057. Dear viewers, you are now watching the Yangjing Feng Yun TV station's exclusive live broadcast, Exploring the Ruins. A super team of 6 famed swordsmen will explore the cities that have been reduced to ruins. While fighting against Yuan Ku, they will discover a huge secret that has been hidden for thousands of years. Today, the team has arrived at the ruins of Qinhuangda City. Although this place is very close to Shanhai Pass and is often raided by swordsmen, there are not many Yuan Ku hiding in the ruins of Qinhuangda City. However, it is still a place full of danger. Grand Shaman Qin Huang once said in our program that Qinhuangda City was named after him, and it was a name that he liked very much. 3,000 years ago, his favorite thing to do was to stand by the seaside of Qinhuangda City and look at the setting sun in the sky. I believe that in the near future, all of you will be able to see the beautiful setting sun through our cameras. However, I don't know if the setting sun now will be any different from the setting sun from 3,000 years ago. A host held a microphone and talked non-stop to a fully automatic flying camera. Beside the host were 6 swordsmen who were vigilantly observing their surroundings, on guard against Yuan Ku who could appear at any time. This was a special live broadcast program produced by Yangjing's largest television station, Yangjing Feng Yun TV station. They sent reporters to follow the swordsmen into the dangerous ruins of the city. Although their gimmick was to explore the secrets under the ruins of the city, they were actually live broadcasting the fierce battle between the swordsmen and Yuan Ku. This program was deeply loved by the masses. Although they could usually see how the swordsmen and Yuan Ku fought through movies and videos, those were after all edited and recorded, and they already knew the outcome. The audience preferred to watch this kind of battle that they didn't know the outcome of. This kind of live broadcast is undoubtedly a very risky way of broadcasting. This is completely different from the reality shows we see now. Although reality shows look quite dangerous, they have all kinds of safety measures. The celebrities who participate in reality shows can't really be in danger. However, this live broadcast program called Exploring the Ruins did not have any safety measures. Yuan Ku didn't care whether the reporters were innocent or not. In the 50 years since this program had been broadcast, more than 10 reporters had died in Yuan Ku's hands. More than 100 people had died in the Six Swordsmen team organized by the television station. Therefore, such a program needed to be produced with great strength. Even the war reporters themselves needed to be at least a sword bearer. Otherwise, they would not be able to stay on the battlefield for more than a few days before dying tragically in the hands of Yuenko. Because the production cost of this program was so high and the content was so thrilling and exciting, the ratings were very high. For example, the current live broadcast of Exploring Qinhuangda City had more than 1 million viewers watching this live broadcast. Be careful. While the host was talking non-stop, a swordsman who was in charge of guarding in the distance suddenly shouted. Everyone immediately became very nervous. Even the host immediately shut his mouth and controlled the automatic camera to record the surroundings. At this moment, the audience also held their breath, waiting for Yuan Ku to suddenly jump out. Everyone, pay attention to the sky in the distance. There seems to be a white Yuan Ku there. Suddenly, a white shadow appeared in the sky in the distance. The host immediately said to the audience nervously. But soon, they found that it was a false alarm. When the white figure revealed its true face, people found that it was a silver-white artificial object. It was a levitating vehicle shaped like a water droplet. On both sides of the levitating vehicle, there was the logo of Yuzhang City. It turned out that this was a levitating vehicle from Yuzhang City. It was a human, not the dangerous Yuan Ku. Everyone, be careful. Who knows, this levitating vehicle might be Yuan Ku in disguise. The leader of the Six Swordsmen said cautiously, then immediately used his personal terminal to send an identification signal to the levitating vehicle. If the levitating vehicle was really a human levitating vehicle, then it would definitely give the team a unique feedback signal. Beep. The personal terminal made a crisp sound, and everyone let out a sigh of relief. This sound meant that the personal terminal had received a feedback signal. The levitating vehicle was indeed a human levitating vehicle. What a pity. I thought I could see the battle with Yuan Ku. Many of the audience said with pity, but there were also many who were very interested in the appearance of the levitating vehicle. This was the first time they had seen a levitating vehicle shaped like a water droplet. This levitating vehicle looked very cool. They didn't know which company produced it, and what was the contact number to order it. Hello, comrades from Yuzhang City. We are swordsmen from Yangjing City. Why don't we meet up? The team leader immediately used his personal terminal to send an invitation to the levitating vehicle. 4 swordsman bearers to meet in the wild at the last minute. It was normal for both sides to get together and chat. After all, in this desolate wasteland, it was not easy to meet a comrade. It was natural for everyone to get together and chat. It was not that the team had not met other swordsman bearers before. Every time they sent out an invitation, the other party would show up. Then, the audience would get to see some other swordsman bearers. Occasionally, they would see a team of more than 10 swordsman bearers fighting together. You are from Yangjing City? Soon, the team leader's personal terminal received a reply from the levitating vehicle. It was a young male voice. That's right. Let's get together. Let's have a chat, the team leader invited. However, this Yuzhang City swordsman did not care about the team leader's invitation. Instead, he said playfully, since you are from Yangjing City, then I'll give this London guy to you. What the hell is this? Hearing this answer, the team leader, the host, and the audience in front of the TV were all confused. What did this answer mean? What did he mean by since you are from Yangjing City, then I'll give this London guy to you? Was there any connection between Yangjing people and London people? Just when everyone was puzzled, The levitating vehicle flew above the team in the blink of an eye. Then, the top of the vehicle was opened, and a white object was pushed out from the levitating vehicle. These swordsman bearers thought that the levitating vehicle had dropped a bomb from the sky. They immediately jumped to the side in panic. At this moment, the team was near the ruins of a house in Qinhuangda City. The ground was covered with sharp concrete ruins, as well as rusted steel bars. The shiny white thing that was thrown out from the hovercraft crashed into the ruins, raising a cloud of dust into the air. After the levitating vehicle dropped the person, it immediately headed towards Yuzhang City. It did not even stop for a second. What is this? Is it a bomb? The host nervously guessed while covering his mouth. When the dust gradually dispersed, the thing that was pushed out from the levitating vehicle was reflected in the eyes of the host and the audience. The thing that was pushed out was actually a naked, white body. Ah, it's actually a man. The male audience in front of the TV were excited when they saw the white body. But when they saw the gender of the body, they immediately cursed. Who the hell wants to see a man's body? Can't you change it to a woman's? Oh my god, mosaic, quickly put on a mosaic. After the host saw the situation clearly, he immediately said to the automatic camera beside him. This fully automatic camera from the future was also very considerate to add automatic mosaic technology. After a few seconds, the white body was automatically mosaic with even more white, only the head was displayed in the image. F***ck, it's fine if a woman is mosaic, but you're a man, why are you mosaic? The audience was even angrier and cursed. The other sword bearers quickly rushed up and helped the naked man up. In the end, they found that the man's body was not light. A steel bar had even pierced the man's waist. They did not know if it had pierced his kidney or not. At the same time, the man's hands were tightly bound by a talisman seal. Obviously, this man was a sword bearer, and the other sword bearer was the one who did it. Otherwise, he would not have been sealed with a talisman seal that only humans had. Comrade, what's wrong with you? Who is so cruel? How could they abuse and humiliate you like this? The leader of the sword-bearers could also see that the person who made the sword-bearer stay did not have any killing intent. He just wanted to humiliate the man. Otherwise, he would not deliberately throw the man in front of him. That person only needed to find a random place to throw the man down, and the man with the talisman seal would definitely die in the hands of the other Yuan Ku. Therefore, the other party deliberately threw the man in front of him so that he could save the man and prevent him from dying in the hands of Yuan Ku. That's right, this is too much. How can he humiliate people like this? Another sword-bearer said indignantly. As if he had discovered a new continent, the host began to analyze the grudge between the two sides to the audience in front of the TV. Why would the owner of the hovercraft humiliate the man like this? Even the audience in front of the TV quickly forgot about the mosaic's dissatisfaction. In fact, everyone's heart was full of gossip. When such an extremely gossipy plot appeared in front of everyone, they could not help but start to gossip about the grudge between the two sides. Wait, don't you think this man looks familiar? Another sword-bearer in the team suddenly patted his head and said. After hearing the sword-bearer's words, he immediately felt that the naked man looked very familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. I remember now. The host was so excited that he could not even hold the microphone steadily. Isn't this the sword spirit of Gui Palace? Oh, this was big news. Chapter 1058. It's the sword spirit of Gui Palace. F***ck. It's really the sword spirit of Gui Palace. Then, the host mentioned the name of the sword spirit of Gui Palace. The rest of the sword-bearers reacted one after another. Who else could this naked person be other than the sword spirit of Gui Palace? Because the number of spiritual sword-level sword-bearers was very small, every sword-bearer received a lot of attention. Most of the sword-bearers could recognize some spiritual sword-level sword-bearers. Moreover, the sword spirit of Gui Palace was a notorious spiritual sword-level sword-bearer who used to be a big shot in the Shanghai Pass Management Committee. It could be said that the sword spirit of Gui Palace was the nightmare of every famous sword-level sword-bearer. What they were most afraid of was being recorded in the Black Notebook by the sword spirit of Gui Palace and becoming a glorious member of the Shanhai Pass. A year and a half ago, the Wu people were mostly wiped out by Grand Shaman Qin Huang. The Shanhai Pass had changed from an extremely dangerous place to a retirement place for famous sword-level swordbearers. The sword spirit of Gui Palace had also lost his greatest deterrent. However, the shadow of the sword spirit of Gui Palace still existed in the hearts of every famous sword-level swordbearer. The face of the sword spirit of Gui Palace could be said to be the most memorable face of a spiritual sword-level swordbearer. It was just that they couldn't imagine that the powerful sword spirit of Gui Palace would be stripped naked and thrown down. The name of the sword spirit of Gui Palace had never popped up in their minds. Therefore, they felt that the person in front of them was very familiar, but they still couldn't recognize him. In fact, some of the sword-bearers present had recognized the sword spirit of Gui Palace from the beginning. However, after recognizing the sword spirit of Gui Palace, they kept their mouths shut for fear of revealing his true identity. Although the sword spirit of the Gui Palace was no longer a threat, the problem was that the sword spirit of the Gui Palace was the son of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. Now that he was stripped naked and thrown down, if such a shameful thing were to be exposed in the live broadcast, one could imagine how miserable the person who revealed the sword spirit of the Gui Palace would be. Only the host, who didn't fear the sword spirit of Gui Palace that much and didn't know that the sword spirit of Gui Palace was the son of Long Shijendi, called out the name of the sword spirit of Gui Palace without any hesitation. At this moment, all the other sword-bearers revealed a look of sudden realization, as if they had just discovered it themselves. The sword-bearers had a look of realization on their faces, but the viewers who were watching the livestream exploded. Many people who knew about the sword spirit's background were so shocked that they fell off their chairs. What kind of joke was this? The son of the dignified Shanhai Pass Management Committee, Long Shijendi, was actually stripped naked and thrown down from the sky. He even deliberately threw it into a live TV program so that millions of viewers could see this shameful scene at the same time. It could be imagined that after this TV program was broadcast, even if the TV station immediately banned it, the impact of this matter would inevitably spread through the internet. In less than a day, everyone would know that the son of the dignified Long Shijendi had been stripped naked and his sword essence had been sealed with a talisman. This was a complete and utter defeat. Hurry up and bring me new clothes, and brand new underwear. After the captain confirmed that this naked person was the sword spirit of Gui Palace, he immediately shouted to his teammates. Oh. The team members hurriedly rummaged through their dimensional pockets, trying to find a new set of clothes. In the end, they discovered that although there were a lot of new clothes in their dimensional pockets, there was no brand new underwear at all. They only had underwear that they had worn once or twice. If the sword spirit of Gui Palace knew about this, wouldn't he hate them to death? I say, you guys. The team leader stomped his feet angrily when his team member couldn't find any clothes for him. He took out a new towel from his dimensional pocket and wrapped it around the sword spirit's body temporarily to avoid exposing himself. However, when the sword spirit appeared in front of the camera in a towel, he looked like a prostitute that the police had caught from a hotel when they were cracking down on pornography and illegal publications. Seal talisman. Which one of you knows how to remove the talisman? Hurry up and help the sword spirit of Gui Palace remove this talisman, the captain said to his teammates after wrapping the sword spirit in a bath towel. Captain, it's not like you don't know. It's not that easy to remove the talisman. If you don't know what the other party is using to remove the talisman, not only will you not be able to remove the talisman, but you may also cause unavoidable and permanent damage to the sword spirit of Gui Palace. Only professionals can remove it. A team member replied softly. He was telling the truth. Depending on the method used to seal the talisman, the method to remove the seal was also different. If one randomly removed the talisman without knowing the other party's method, there was a 90% chance that not only would the talisman not be able to remove the talisman, but it would also cause permanent damage to the other party. Therefore, the best solution was to escort the sword spirit of Gui Palace back to Yangjing City and ask professionals there to analyze the sealing method of the talisman. Then, the professionals would remove the talisman. It was better for the sword-bearers to not act rashly. Otherwise, the sword spirit of Gui Palace and Longsha Jendi would bear a deep grudge against them. No. Just use the simplest method to remove the talisman. The sword spirit of Gui Palace, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said his first words after seeing the sword-bearers. Although the talisman could seal the sword-bearers' sword essence, it couldn't seal their mouths. While the captain was fiddling with the sword spirit of Gui Palace, the sword spirit of Gui Palace kept his mouth shut the entire time. His expression was as dull as a rock, and he didn't stop the captain's actions. He just let the captain do as he pleased, as if he had lost his mind. Only when the other sword-bearers expressed that they wanted to send the sword spirit of Gui Palace back to Yangjing City to remove the seal did the sword spirit of Gui Palace finally speak. The current situation had already tortured the sword spirit of Gui Palace. If he was sent to Yangjing City to be studied again, it would be no different from torturing the sword spirit of Gui Palace again. Can we just use the simplest method? The captain couldn't help but confirm again. The so-called simplest method was to directly send his sword essence into the talisman and remove the seal. However, the premise was that the person who sealed the talisman didn't use any special sealing method. Otherwise, sending his sword essence into the talisman would result in the terrible consequences mentioned before. Just use it, the sword spirit of Gui Palace said while gritting his teeth. He was obviously suppressing the huge anger in his heart. The captain didn't dare to ask any more questions. He directly sent his sword essence into the talisman. Just like the sword spirit of Gui Palace had said, the talisman was easily removed. This once again proved that the person who sealed the sword spirit of Gui Palace had only used the simplest sealing method to humiliate the sword spirit of Gui Palace. This was the most humiliating method. As the seal was removed, the sword spirit threw away the towel that was wrapped around his body. Then, he picked up a dimensional pouch from where he had fallen. With a thought, he took out a new set of clothes from the dimensional pouch. He closed his eyes and put them on. The sword spirit of Gui Palace was once again wrapped in a handsome set of clothes. Guhan! Guhan! The sword spirit of Gui Palace clenched his fists tightly after putting on his clothes and repeated the name over and over again. He didn't say it softly, so even the other sword-bearers around him could hear him clearly. Guhan? Could it be this fellow called Guhan who did this to the sword spirit of Gui Palace? Seeing the sword spirit's expression, as long as the other sword-bearers weren't fools, they would be able to guess that the person who had humiliated the sword spirit was Ji Han. Oh. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? The culprit behind all of this is a person called Ji Han. We will immediately contact the director and ask him to help us look up information on this person called Ji Han. The host on the other side spoke excitedly. At this moment, the sword spirit of Gui Palace realized that the situation seemed to have exceeded his imagination. Who is this person? What are you doing here? The sword spirit of Gui Palace asked hurriedly. This. The captain hesitated. He knew that if he told the truth, the sword spirit of Gui Palace would probably vomit blood in anger when he found out that the whole thing was being broadcasted live. However, the captain had no choice but to tell the truth. He could only say hesitantly, "He is the host of Exploring the Ruins. We are doing a live broadcast. If the expression of the sword spirit of Gui Palace was as cold as winter in December, then the expression of the sword spirit of Gui Palace right now was as cold as hell." The sword spirit of Gui Palace didn't say anything and directly rushed to the host's side. With a wave of sword chi, the automatic tracking camera that was being broadcasted live was cut into pieces. The audience, who were nervously watching the development of the situation, instantly found that the entire TV screen had turned black. However, this didn't matter, because the most critical information had already been broadcast live on TV, and the previous live diagnosis video had also been completely recorded by someone. Then, it was directly published on the internet with a very eye-catching title, Live Broadcast of a Spirit Sword-Level Swordsman Naked. Crown Prince Jendi suffered the most cruel humiliation in the world. As a result, just like what was said before, this video began to spread on the internet at an unimaginable speed. In addition, the protagonist this time was a spiritual sword-level sword wielder, who was also the crown prince of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. This was extremely explosive news. Therefore, in just one day, more than 50% of the world's people knew about this news. They all knew that Longsha Gendi's son had been stripped naked and thrown down from the sky. Naturally, the name of the sword spirit of Gui Palace, Guhan, also appeared in the audience's attention along with the spread of this news. Chapter 1059. I'm sorry, Father. I've embarrassed you this time. In a private sword tomb in the game world, the sword spirit of Gui Palace said to a man sitting beside him with a wretched expression. This man was none other than the father of the sword spirit of Gui Palace, Longsha Gendi. If I had known that you would end up like this, I wouldn't have agreed to Ying Zheng's request. Longsha Gendi said with a slight frown. Can I refuse Ying Zheng's request? The sword spirit of Gui Palace smiled bitterly. Besides, I underestimated him this time. I didn't expect that Guhan would be able to defeat me even though he had just come out of Shanhai Pass and had only recovered a few thousand quarks of sword essence. Guhan's strength has exceeded our expectations. I'm afraid we'll have to revise our plan. It doesn't matter. Longsha Gendi waved his hand. The stronger Guhan is, the better. The stronger he is, the smoother our plan will be. What about Ying Zheng? The sword spirit of Gui Palace asked in a somewhat distressed tone. The rest is his own problem. We have done what we promised him. You have also suffered such humiliation. We have been extremely benevolent. Longsha Gendi pondered for a moment with a gloomy expression. No, if Guhan's strength grows too fast, it will be detrimental to our plan. Now, tell me in detail. What level has Guhan reached? After his heaven-reliant sword defeated my Aqua Dragon Sparrow, I was about to leave. However, I didn't expect that Guhan wouldn't let me go, so the two of us started fighting. I thought that I could easily defeat Guhan with millions of quarks of sword essence. However, I didn't expect that Guhan's swordsmanship had already reached the level of rules. He only relied on a famed sword maiden with a small amount of sword essence to beat me up. Recalling the battle, the sword spirit of Gui Palace couldn't help but reveal an expression of fear. Rules. Are you saying that Guhan's swordsmanship has already reached the level of rules? Longsha Gendi jumped up from his seat in surprise. Are you sure you're not kidding me? Since ancient times, only Kanzu, Zhetian Gendi, Jiyujin Gendi, and that existence have been able to enter the realm of rules in swordsmanship. Moreover, their swordsmanship entered the realm of rules after the age of 45. Guhan is only 22 years old this year, yet he has already entered the realm of rules. If he hadn't entered the realm of rules, how could I, a top-notch spirit sword level swordsman, lose to a famed sword level swordsman with only a few thousand quarks of sword essence? In the end, I was completely controlled by him and humiliated in such a way. The sword spirit of Gui Hall smiled even more bitterly. Everything in the world can be used as a sword. Guhan's swordsmanship has indeed reached the level of rules. Under his rules, I could only let him wear down my personal shield bit by bit. If it weren't for my sword essence being so much more than his, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than 1,000 moves. At most, I would have been defeated within 20 moves. Fighting with him really hurt my self-esteem. After this fight, I wouldn't dare to touch the sword hilt for at least 3 months. Otherwise, my mind would be filled with his sword shadows. I might as well let the sword maiden fight by herself. Didn't you hurt him at all? Longsha Gendi asked again. Not really. At this point, the sword spirit of Gui Hall's face finally revealed a real smile. After all, his sword essence is too inferior to mine. After confirming that his swordsmanship has entered the realm of rules, coupled with his aggressiveness, I simply used that move. I'm afraid that his current situation is not much better than mine. You used that forbidden move? Longsha Gendi was stunned. You sealed his Zifu? Most likely. The sword spirit of Gui Hall said with certainty. Why did he use the simplest sealing method when he sealed me with the sealing rune? It's because he probably couldn't use any sword essence at that time. I'm afraid he even lost contact with the sword marks. Now, the sword maiden is just an ordinary iron sword in his hand. Interesting. Long Shijendi's mouth curved into a smile. You should immediately tell this news to Ying Zheng and those idiots in Yuzhang City. Otherwise, they won't even have the courage to chase after Guhan again. Tell them about this. The sword spirit of Gui Hall showed a hesitant expression. Now, Guhan is equivalent to an ordinary person. If those people really send people to chase after Guhan again, I'm afraid that Guhan will really die in their hands. Won't our plan be ruined then? Moreover, I'm afraid that existence will also blame us. Father, when that time comes, won't you? It's okay. Although that existence is terrifying, he doesn't have the guts to deal with me. Now, I just want to know how far Guhan can go in this situation. Long Shijendi said with a smile. This Gui Palace sword spirit. I didn't expect his sword lady to be the Black Death Sword. On the other side of the flying droplet, Ji Yuhan thought to himself with a serious expression. Just as the sword spirit of Gui Hall had said, Guhan had indeed suffered a very serious injury from his last attack. Moreover, the injury was not a physical injury, but a direct effect on his Zifu. This was the terror of the Black Death Sword, a spirit sword maiden. The Black Death Sword was the most sinister and vicious sword maiden of the Devil Path. For Yuan Ku, her unique skill could seal the most important parts of Yuan Ku's devil heart and godhead, which could directly cause a devastating blow to Yuan Ku. And for the sword bearer, such a seal would naturally directly affect his Zifu. And the most abnormal thing was that this seal was not a temporary seal like most of the sealing skills, but a permanent effect. Once sealed by the Black Death Sword, unless a more powerful sword bearer used violence to break it, the seal would exist forever, and even the caster would not be able to remove it. Of course, such a terrifying unique skill also had its shortcomings. That was, the caster's sword essence must be far higher than the caster's sword essence. Moreover, unless there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences, the success rate of sealing between the sword bearers of the same level was only about 20%. Most importantly, once this technique was utilized, the sword essence within the wielder's body would definitely be completely exhausted, and there wouldn't be any leftovers left. Such a unique skill was not very practical. After all, there was only a 20% success rate between opponents of the same level of sword essence. It would be fine if the seal was successful, but if the seal failed, the caster's sword essence would be consumed, and the caster would become a fish that could be easily squashed. However, if there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences, and there was a 90% success rate, then it would become meaningless. If there was a huge difference between the two sides' sword essences, then there would be no need to use such a unique skill. Wouldn't it be better to just defeat the opponent cleanly? However, at this moment, this had become the most practical skill for the Gui Palace's sword spirit. In any case, he could not defeat Guhan, whose swordsmanship had already entered the realm of the rules. If he persisted like this, he would be defeated by Guhan sooner or later, so he might as well perish together with him. This was because the unique skill could be used as long as the swords of both sides touched. Even though Guhan's swordsmanship had entered the realm of the rules, it was inevitable that their swords would collide. Guhan could not avoid such a seal at all. Most importantly, Guhan's sword essence was only a few thousand quarks, while the Gui Palace's sword spirit sword essence was hundreds of thousands of quarks. The difference between the two was 100 times, so the success rate of the Black Death Sword was infinitely close to 100%. The result was self-evident. Guhan was ruthlessly tricked by the Gui Palace's sword spirit, and his purple palace was forcefully sealed by the Black Death Sword. Of course, the Gui Palace's sword spirit also paid a price. All of his sword essence was consumed, and he was easily captured by Guhan. Then, he was controlled by a sealing talisman. Guhan, as long as you are willing to go back with me, I promise that my father will do his best to help you break the seal on your purple palace. This was the Gui Palace's sword spirit's final plan. In order to break the seal on the Black Death Sword, a powerful swordbearer would need to use a huge amount of sword essence to break the seal on the Black Death Sword. In order to break the seal on the Black Death Sword, you will need at least 10 times more sword essence than when I sealed you. Only then will you be able to break the seal by force. The Gui Palace's sword spirit continued, I used 800,000 quarks of sword essence to seal you, so you will need a swordbearer with at least 8 million quarks of sword essence to break my seal. How many swordbearers in the world have 8 million quarks of sword essence? Will they be willing to help you? I promise that as long as you come with me to see my father will definitely help you break the seal, the Gui Palace's sword spirit said. Go with you to see Longsha Jendi. Didn't you say that you wanted me to return to the Shanhai Pass? Guhan was not angry that his purple palace had been sealed. Instead, he asked the Gui Palace's sword spirit. I didn't expect your swordsmanship to have entered the realm of rules. This is not in line with our plan. Fine, as long as you are willing to go with me to see my father, I promise that we will no longer be enemies. I still want to be friends with you, the Gui Palace's sword spirit said sincerely. The Gui Palace's sword spirit was sincere, but everyone knew what happened in the end. Guhan did not care about the Gui Palace's I want to be friends with you thought. Instead, he took everything from the Gui Palace to the Shanhai Pass. Originally, Guhan had only planned to throw the Gui Palace into the Shanhai Pass to save the Gui Palace's face. However, after his purple palace had been sealed, Guhan did not hold back anymore. When he found out that there was a live broadcast nearby, he immediately threw the Gui Palace's sword spirit in front of the live broadcast to vent his anger over his purple palace being sealed. However, the Gui Palace's sword spirit had missed something in the end. Guhan's purple palace had not been completely sealed. At the crucial moment, a figure that had not been seen for a long time had appeared to mess things up. Chapter 1060. Actually, when Guhan used the sealing rune to seal the sword spirit of Gui Hall, Guhan realized that his Z Palace had been completely sealed. His first plan was to return the favor and destroy the sword spirit's Z Palace as well. Ever since he had left the Shanhai Pass, he had been accumulating anger in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to challenge the sword spirit of the Gui Hall to vent his anger after the heavenly sword had defeated the deepwater dragon Sparrow and the sword spirit of the Gui Hall had made it clear that he did not intend to interfere in this matter. However, Guhan did not expect that he would fail miserably at the very last moment. His Z Palace had been sealed by the sword spirit of Gui Hall. The moment his purple palace was sealed, his connection with his sword mark disappeared without a trace. Yi Tian, who had been sitting on a chair and drinking wine while watching the fight, also turned back into his sword form the moment his purple palace was sealed and fell to the ground. From this moment onwards, until the seal on his purple palace was lifted, not only was Ji Yuhan unable to release his sword Maiden, he couldn't even communicate with her through the sword mark. Ji Yuhan couldn't even use the sword essence in his purple palace. Simply put, Guhan, who had just left Shanhai Pass, felt like he had returned to Shanhai Pass and became an ordinary person again. However, there was still the Ju Tian Stars R banner in Shanhai Pass that could remove the seal. However, even if there were hundreds of Ju Tian Stars R banners beside Guhan, Guhan would not be able to communicate with his sword lady. Guhan had lost his sword lady. Thinking about how he had suddenly lost contact with all his sword ladies and how he could no longer be with Qingpin, Duyu, Juzi, Starting Point, Yi Tian, and the others, as well as all the unfairness he had encountered today, Guhan could not help but feel angry. He was ready to use the same method to take revenge on the sword spirit of Gui Hall. Although Guhan did not have the ability to seal other people's Z Palace like the sword spirit, he could do it more thoroughly. He could destroy the sword spirit's Z Palace directly. However, if Guhan really did that, then Guhan and the sword spirit of Gui Hall and his father, Longsha Jendi, would have a deep and irreconcilable hatred. Destroying the Z Palace was different from sealing it. After the Z Palace was sealed, he could find a way to remove the seal. There would not be any irreversible consequences. However, if Guhan destroyed the sword spirit's Z Palace, then even if Longsha Jendi took action, the sword spirit's Z Palace would absolutely not be able to recover. The sword spirit would then completely become an ordinary person. Having said that, everyone could imagine that if Guhan really did that, Longsha Jendi would definitely fall into a state of madness. Even if Jendi's identity and face were to be thrown away, he would still personally deal with Guhan. At this time, although Guhan's swordsmanship had entered the realm of laws, Dealing with Gendi was still like throwing an egg against a rock. Guhan did not have the confidence to escape from an enraged Gendi. However, at that time, Guhan was somewhat blinded by anger. When he was about to recklessly destroy the Sword Spirit Z Palace, a crucial voice saved the Sword Spirit's life. It also saved Guhan's life. "Oh, I had a good sleep. Brat, how long did I sleep this time?" This shrewish voice instantly pulled Guhan out of his anger. Guhan's rationality once again occupied his mind. "Lady Shenyuan?" Guhan was surprised to find that the Shenyuan sword was actually talking to him. Ever since the Heaven and Earth furnace had been opened and the dot sword had been reforged, the Shenyuan sword had been in a state of deep sleep. It had not spoken a single word to Guhan. Guhan had thought that she would never wake up before he synchronized with her. He had not expected that the Shenyuan sword would magically appear at this time. "Lady Shenyuan, how can you speak to me in my mind? Isn't my Z Palace already?" At this time, Guhan was even more surprised to find that the Shenyuan sword was actually speaking to him in his mind. It must be known that when he had spoken to the Shenyuan sword before, it had directly spoken to him through its body. However, at this moment, the Shenyuan sword's voice had appeared in his mind. This was really too strange. "Bullshit. I'm not your lady sword. Your Z Palace has been sealed, so of course it won't affect me," the Shenyuan sword scolded. "As for why I can speak in your mind, it's because I found quite a few tonics in your body. So, I sent a consciousness clone into your body to eat some tonics. You wouldn't be reluctant to do that, would you?" "Tonics?" Guhan was confused. "How could there be tonics in my body?" "It's the tonics that sealed your Z Palace." The Shenyuan sword chuckled. "It's been a long time since I've encountered such an appetizing power. I couldn't help but wake up and have a feast." This time, Guhan finally understood. The tonics that the Shenyuan sword had mentioned were actually the power that the Gui Hall sword spirit had used to seal his Z Palace. Wait, if the lady sword had absorbed the power that sealed his Z Palace, didn't that mean that the seal on his Z Palace could be removed in this way? Guhan immediately asked the Shenyuan sword for confirmation. The Shenyuan sword answered, "That's right. As long as I finish these tonics, the seal on your Z Palace can be removed. However, there's quite a lot of them. I'll need at least a month to finish them all. So, during this month, you'll still have to be an ordinary person." Guhan heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the Shenyuan sword's words. Guhan could accept a month's time. Since the problem of his Z Palace being sealed could be resolved, the anger that had been lingering in Guhan's mind had mostly dissipated. Of course, Guhan couldn't destroy the Gui Hall sword spirit's Z Palace anymore. However, he had to take revenge. That was why he had thrown the Gui Hall sword spirit, who had been stripped naked, onto a live TV show. After throwing the Gui Hall sword spirit to the team of swordbearers, Guhan chatted with the Shenyuan sword in the hovering flying car. Perhaps it was because the Shenyuan sword had to stay in Guhan's body for a long time to eat tonics, so the Shenyuan sword and Guhan chatted a lot. "Did you know? Actually, my original name wasn't Shenyuan sword." The Shenyuan sword accidentally revealed a secret. "Actually, I already existed before I met the Yellow Emperor. However, at that time, I was called the Witch-Slaying Sword." The Witch-Slaying Sword. The name shocked Guhan. Judging from the meaning of the name, the Shenyuan sword seemed to be a magical sword that was specially used to kill the Wu people. I could smell the strong scent of the Wu people near the city wall. It seems that the Wu people are gathered inside the city wall, right? The Shenyuan sword had been in a deep sleep for a long time while Guhan was fighting in the Shanhai Pass. The last time the Shenyuan sword had mentioned that the world was still in the era of Zhetian Zhendi. Therefore, it seemed that the Shenyuan sword didn't know about the situation in the Shanhai Pass. Therefore, Guhan told the Shenyuan sword everything that had happened in the Shanhai Pass. The Shenyuan sword sighed emotionally. Back then, the demon clan spent a lot of effort to kill 11 of the 12 Zhu Wu. I didn't expect that all 12 Zhu Wu would be back in the blink of an eye. I must have been very busy back then. Then, the Shenyuan sword told Guhan about what had happened in the past. It turned out that the Shenyuan sword was not born in the era of the Yellow Emperor, but in the primitive era, which was even earlier than the Yellow Emperor. It had been millions of years since then. According to the Shenyuan sword, she was originally the blade of Pangu's axe. Then, Pangu's axe turned into the three great divine weapons of the primitive era. However, her blade was not so lucky and could not turn into a new primordial treasure. In the end, Demon Emperor Jun kept it in the treasure vault. At that time, the main characters in the world were the Wu people and the Demon Clan. The human clan was just an inconspicuous small race that Nush had just illuminated. In the eyes of the Demon Clan and the Wu people, they were not even food. However, because it was what Lady Nush relied on to become a saint, the Demon Clan and the Wu people did not deliberately attack the human clan. At that time, the Demon Clan and the Wu people fought endlessly for the only main character in the world. Among them, the 12 Zhu Wu's power, as they had inherited Pangu's flesh and blood, were extremely powerful. At the same time, the defensive ability of their bodies was extremely terrifying. According to the Shenyuan sword, even a sword lady at the level of an immortal sword would find it difficult to break through the 12 Zhu Wu's defense. Therefore, every time they really fought with the 12 Zhu Wu, the Demon Clan would usually be the ones who lost in the end. This was because the Demon Clan's top combat power was no match for the Wu people. Later, in order to kill the Wu people, the Demon Clan took out the blade of Pangu's axe. With all kinds of extremely precious materials, they forged a magical weapon that could easily cut through the flesh and blood of the Zhu Wu, which was the Wu-slaying sword. Later, in the decisive battle between the Demon Clan and the Wu people, Di Jun used the Wu-slaying sword as his last secret trump card. As expected, he showed his great power and killed the 2 Zhu Wus of the Wu people in one fell swoop. After losing the 2 Zhu Wus, the top strength of the Wu people was no longer a match for the Demon Clan. The balance of power began to turn. The Demon Clan began to attack the Wu people from all directions, while the Wu people retreated step by step. When the Wu people were about to be completely defeated, the Wu people also showed their trump card, which was the 12 Divine Beings killing formation. Under the power of the 12 Divine Beings killing formation, the Demon Clan suffered heavy losses. Many of the 10 great demon saints died in the battle. However, the Wu people also had their own weaknesses. In order to form the 12 Divine Beings killing formation, the remaining 10 Zhu Wus had to use their own essence and blood to forcibly push the 2 great sorcerers to the realm of Zhu Wu. As a result, the 2 Zhu Wus were not stable. In the later stage of the battle, the 2 Zhu Wus directly fell back to the realm of great sorcerers. This gave the Demon Clan hope. Therefore, the two clans launched an endless battle that lasted for thousands of years. In the end, 11 Zhu Wus died in the battle. Di Jun and Tai Yi also perished together with the Zhu Wu. Only the Wu-slaying sword fell into the territory of the human clan. It was picked up by Gongsun Xuanyuan's ancestor and worshipped as a magical weapon of his tribe. Chapter 1061. Later on, the human emperor, Yellow Emperor Shenyuan, and the remnants of the sorcerer tribe fought a great battle. In the early stages, he was defeated by the great sorcerer, Juyu, and was defeated again and again. In the end, he remembered that there was still a Wu-slaying sword in the tribe's treasure vault, so he took it out. As expected, the great wizard Kai Yu was no match for the witch-slaying sword when it appeared again. He was defeated, and a part of the Wu people's bloodline merged with the human bloodline. Kai Yu's tribe, the Zhou tribe, escaped to the Miaojiang of today and gradually evolved into the Miao tribe. The Miao tribe eventually mixed with the human bloodline, so there were no more pure Wu people in the world. The witch-slaying sword that helped the Emperor Huang Shenyuan defeat the Wu people officially became the symbol of the Emperor Huang Shenyuan. Later on, the Emperor Huang Shenyuan felt that the witch-slaying sword's murderous aura was too strong and not suitable to suppress the destiny of the human race. Therefore, he opened the furnace of heaven and earth and carved the mountains, rivers, and the 4 seasons calendar on the blade of the witch-slaying sword. He used the power of heaven and earth and the destiny of the human race to neutralize the sword's murderous aura. From then on, the witch-slaying sword was no longer the divine sword that was used to kill the Wu people. Instead, it officially became the symbol of the human race's destiny. It was the world's #1 emperor sword, the Shenyuan sword. After listening to the story of the Shenyuan sword, Guhan was filled with emotions. He didn't expect there to be so many stories behind it. He didn't expect the Wu people to be so powerful that they could rule the entire Chaos Land. In fact, after the apocalypse, the Demon Emperor Di Jun, the Eastern Emperor Tai, and even the 12 Zhu Wu had returned to this world. However, the Demon Emperor Di Jun and the Eastern Emperor Tai had died in the hands of the heaven-shrouding Jendi, while the other had been seriously injured by the 3 Jendi and had disappeared. The 12 Zhu Wu had been completely sealed in the Shanhai Pass by the human race. It seemed that the human race was even more powerful than the sorcerer and demon races back then. By the way, you said that Nuer was a saint. What does a saint mean? Guhan suddenly recalled that the Shenyuan sword had mentioned the word saint. According to Guhan, a saint seemed to be Confucius and Laozi, who had founded a great sect. Why was Nuer, a demon race with a human head and a snake body, called a saint? Although this saint was said to have created the human race in the legends. Sages are the most powerful people in the world. Nothing can kill them except themselves. They have merged with the heavenly Tao of this world. I can't explain it to you in a few words. Anyway, you just need to know that sages are very powerful. If you are lucky enough to see them, just run away, Shenyuan sword said in a timid manner. What if I synchronize with you? Guhan smiled. At that time, do I still need to turn around and run when I see them? Damn it, I treat you as a friend, but you want to coordinate with me at the same time. What a shameless bastard. Shenyuan sword muttered unhappily, but she still replied, even if you're really synchronized with me, you're not on the same level as those 7 freaks. You probably can't even beat one of their fingers. Anyway, you just have to run away. They won't have the cheek to bully a little guy like you. Shenyuan sword snorted. 7. Are there 7 sages in total? Guhan asked curiously. Let me count. Nuer, Jirying, Zhuanti, Taishang Laojun, Yuansha Tianzuan, Tongtian sect leader, and the guy whose name I can't even say. Well, it's 7, Shenyuan sword said as it calculated. Tongtian sect leader. Hearing this name from Shenyuan sword's mouth, Guhan was excited. Wasn't this the legendary wielder of the Qingping sword? Lady Shenyuan, who is this Tongtian sect leader? What's his weapon? Guhan forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart and asked in a calm tone as possible. He's the incarnation of Pangu's spirit, so his weapon is, of course, a sword. That guy likes to use swords the most, especially the 4 immortal killing swords and the Qingping sword. They're simply. Shenyuan sword suddenly felt sick and shut its mouth instantly. Obviously, it found that it had leaked something. Lady Shenyuan, please tell me about Tongtian sect leader. This is very important to me. Guhan could no longer hide his emotions and said very excitedly. Well, although I'm not afraid of Tongtian sect leader, I don't want to be targeted by him. That's a terrible thing. Shenyuan sword said it was not afraid of Tongtian sect leader, but said it was a terrible thing the next moment. Obviously, Shenyuan sword was still very afraid of Tongtian sect leader. Looking at Shenyuan sword's attitude, Guhan knew it would be difficult to get more information from Shenyuan sword. But it didn't matter. Since Shenyuan sword was living in his body now, he would have a chance to get the information he needed from Shenyuan sword sooner or later. Guhan and Shenyuan sword talked about some other topics. At the same time, he looked at the positioning system of his personal terminal and found that the droplet flying car had traveled somewhere between Yangjing City and Yuzhong City. At this speed, it would probably take about 5 hours to return to Yuzhong City. But Guhan's journey was destined to not be so smooth. When he was helping Shenyuan sword locate him, a strong alarm suddenly sounded inside the droplet flying car. Warning. Research vehicle number 44757865 has insufficient energy and is unable to maintain flight. It will automatically land in 5 minutes. Warning. Research vehicle number 44757865 has insufficient energy and is unable to maintain flight. It will automatically land in 4 minutes and 59 seconds. The droplet flying car actually ran out of energy. This sudden situation caught Guhan off guard. Only then did Guhan remember that ever since he owned the droplet flying car, he had never cared about the energy problem of the droplet flying car. This was because all hovercrafts relied on a small nuclear fuel cell inside them for power. A small nuclear fuel cell was enough for a hovercraft to use for 1,000 years, so there was no problem with the hovercraft needing to recharge its energy. But this droplet flying car was different. This droplet flying car was a research vehicle created by a super-ancient civilization 6 million years ago. If the battery of an ordinary mobile phone was completely shut down for a year, the battery in the battery would be exhausted, not to mention the fact that the energy source of this droplet flying car had been released for 6 million years. The energy source of the droplet flying car had not been recharged for 6 million years. Previously, flying around with Guhan had already used up the little energy it had left. Now that the droplet flying car was alive, it was only natural. How do I recharge the energy of research vehicle number 44757865? Guhan tried to use his mind to ask the control terminal of the droplet flying car. Please inject the control terminal of research vehicle number 44757865 with the power of chaos. It can replenish the energy of research vehicle number 44757865. The control terminal gave the answer to Guhan's question, but the answer was the same as not giving it. Now that Guhan did not even have the sword element, where could he find the power of chaos? However, the name power of chaos still made Guhan's heart skip a beat. It was somewhat similar to the classification of flood and desolate class Yuan Ku. Could it be that there was some kind of connection between them? Well, now was not the time to think about these things. After waiting for 5 minutes, the droplet flying car stopped firing on time and fell directly from the sky in a free fall. During the fall, the droplet flying car directly kicked Guhan out of the droplet flying car, causing Guhan to directly come into close contact with the ground. I didn't expect my body to become so fragile after my purple palace was sealed. Because the purple palace was sealed, Guhan's body had completely returned to the level of an ordinary person. As a result, the bone in Guhan's left leg was directly fractured, and his entire left leg was twisted in a strange posture. Forget it, I'll just eat a nano-medical capsule. At this time, the most economical way was of course to lie in the medical cabin and use the medical cabin to treat his leg. However, the problem was that in this wilderness full of Yuan Ku, without the protection of a fellow swordsman, lying in the medical cabin to treat his leg was no different from seeking death. Therefore, using the nano-medical capsule to treat the leg bone was the most correct choice. However, when Lung Qingqiu instinctively prepared to take out the nano-medical capsule from the dimensional pocket, she found that when the purple palace was sealed, even the dimensional pocket was sealed. Guhan couldn't take anything out of the dimensional pocket at all, so I've become a cripple? Only now did Guhan realize that his situation had become abnormally bad. The droplet flying car had stopped firing at the wrong time. It happened to be in the ruined area between Yuzhong City and Yangjing City. This area was completely Yuan Ku's territory. If it was the previous Guhan, as long as it wasn't a universe rank or a universe rank Yuan Ku, Guhan could easily send them back to their own dimension. But now, Guhan's purple palace was sealed, and he had completely become an ordinary person. Although Guhan was still fearless against low-level Yuan Ku, and could easily kill these Yuan Ku by relying on his swordsmanship, if he met a nether rank or meteor rank Yuan Ku, then Guhan wouldn't be so confident. Not to mention that Guhan had now become a cripple. His left leg had been completely crippled, and his mobility had been severely restricted. This caused Guhan's swordsmanship to drop by more than 90%. When a person lost the ability to move, then no matter how brilliant his swordsmanship was, he was nothing more than a live target. To make a simple comparison, Guhan's current swordsmanship wasn't as brilliant as it was when he had just turned 18. At this moment, even if only a ghost rank Yuan Ku appeared, it would probably be able to easily take Guhan's life. The only thing that Guhan could rejoice about was that when his purple palace was sealed, the heavenly sword happened to be drinking outside, unlike the other sword ladies that were temporarily placed in his dimensional pocket. Otherwise, when Yuan Ku attacked, Guhan wouldn't even have a weapon that could fight against Yuan Ku. Then, he could only wait for death. However, Guhan's current situation was only a little better than waiting for death. Chapter 1062. Liu Yunyu struggled to move forward with the team. This was a team of 8 sword-bearers. 4 of the 8 sword-bearers were carrying a medical pod, while the other 2 were leading the way. Liu Yunyu and one of the sword-bearers were at the back, in charge of protecting the team's retreat. From the outside, although the sword-bearers' clothes were clean and simple, their morale was not high. In fact, it could be said that their morale was low. Some of the sword-bearers had wounds on their bodies that were bleeding profusely. These wounds were not even bandaged and were left exposed. From this point, it was obvious that this team was in a desperate situation. The wounds on their bodies were not bandaged, which meant that they had run out of healing potions. This team of 8 did not have the strength to carry 2 medical pods at the same time, so they could only let the most heavily injured sword-bearer enter the medical pod to save his own life. As for the superficial wounds that were not life-threatening, they could only leave it to fate. Reporting, Captain. There are signs of a battle ahead, and there are also Yuan Ku's roars in the distance. We suspect that there are sword-bearers fighting with Yuan Ku. The 2 sword-bearers who were leading the way suddenly ran back and said to a middle-aged man who was carrying a medical pod. Hearing this, the captain instantly became nervous. Xu Junjie, can you find out the level and number of Yuan Ku? Logically speaking, when they discovered that there was a comrade fighting with Yuan Ku, the team should have immediately rushed over to help without hesitation. However, the problem was that their current situation was that they lacked medicine. At the same time, the sword-bearers' combat power was severely damaged. If they rushed over rashly, not only would they not be able to save the sword-bearer, but they would also send their own team into danger. As the captain of this team, he had to consider the collective interests of the team. If Yuan Ku's level was too high or there were too many of them, the captain could only lead his team to escape in another direction. Wait a moment, I'll let the dark gold sword take a look. Xu Junjie closed his eyes, clearly beginning to share his vision with his sword mistress. After about 5 minutes, Xu Junjie suddenly opened his eyes and said, I see it, it's 3 orcs surrounding an injured swordsman. The swordsman's left leg seems to be fractured, so he can only fight with his back against a pine tree. Furthermore, his sword Maiden seemed to have been severely injured and could no longer be released. He could only use the sword Maiden's body to fight. However, his swordsmanship was very strong, and those half-beastmen could not get close to him at all. However, this sword-wielder's stamina is being consumed very quickly. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Xu Junjie, who shared his vision with the sword lady, quickly told them what he had discovered. Shang Yi, the leader of the team, hesitated for a while before asking his teammates, what do you guys think? Should we go and save the sword-bearer? I think we should just forget about it. Qin Liang and Yu Yu's sword maidens are about to shatter. It's impossible for them to fight anymore. Mel Lauer is lying in the medical pod and needs to be taken care of. How can we save the besieged swordsman? That's right. You're right. You're right. No, we have to go and save him. The tallest sword-bearer in the team immediately retorted. As a sword-bearer, how can you not save your comrade when he's in danger? Is this what a sword-bearer should do? Have you guys forgotten the code of conduct of a sword-bearer? The first lesson we learned when we entered Yuzhong University is to do our best to save our comrade. I don't think we should waste any more time here. Li Xiangtian, since you're so afraid of death, you can stay here and take care of the medical pod. We'll go and save the sword-bearer. Please, Chu Hanming, didn't you hear that there are 3 half-beastmen surrounding the sword-bearer? Li Xiangtian tried his best to persuade him. These half-beastmen are ghost-level Yuan Ku. It's not that easy to deal with them. We might have to pay a heavy price. It's not worth it for a sword-bearer that we don't know. It's just 3 ghost-level Yuan Ku. We have 2 saber-level sword-bearers and 4 saber-level sword-bearers. How can we not deal with 3 ghost-level Yuan Ku? As long as we rush over, we can save our comrade. It's such a simple matter. What's there to hesitate about? It's the life of a comrade we're talking about. Chu Hanming argued loudly. Chu Hanming, I'll be honest here. The one with a broken leg is just a burden. Even if we save him, I'm afraid we'll still have to take care of him. He'll only be a burden to us. We're lost in this forest, and we don't have enough food and medicine. If we bring along a sword-bearer with a broken leg, we'll only die faster. You're shameless. Do you still have any honor as a sword-bearer? How dare you say such shameless words? What burden? That's our comrade, we can't leave him behind. Chu Hanming and Li Xiangtian began to argue fiercely. The other sword-bearers in the team expressed their stance with silence. Shang Yi sighed. Deep down in his heart, he was also not inclined to save them. His team was already on the verge of collapsing. If another injured sword wielder joined the fray, the team would most likely collapse before they could even make it through. Just as Shang Yi was about to announce his decision, Liu Yunyu, who was at the back of the team, suddenly said weakly, "I think he might know how to get out of this forest." Liu Yunyu's words caused everyone to fall silent. After a while, Shang Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Qin Liang, Yu, the two of you will leave your sword ladies here. The rest of you will attack together and save that comrade. There really aren't any fools in this world." Gu Han, who was dealing with 3 half-beastmen at the same time, had long sensed that a sword lady was lurking beside him. This meant that there was at least one sword-bearer nearby. At first, this discovery made Gu Han overjoyed. Gu Han had been struggling in this forest for 3 whole days. These 3 days were probably the most miserable days of Gu Han's life. The droplet flying car was indeed a high technology from the previous civilization. It actually had the ability to shrink. When it fell to the ground, it turned into a palm-sized droplet flying car model. Gu Han could easily put it in his pocket and carry it with him. However, the dimensional pocket still could not be opened. It was equivalent to Gu Han losing all of his biological resources. In the end, he could only rely on some wild fruits to satisfy his hunger. Alone in the extremely dangerous wilderness, and having lost his sword element, Gu Han did not dare to sleep for the past 3 days. He was afraid that he would be ambushed by Yuan Ku while he slept. At most, he could only close his eyes for a while on a tree. Therefore, Gu Han's days were quite miserable. Therefore, when Gu Han found someone beside him, he was quite happy. At the very least, he could eat normal food and sleep in a tent. More importantly, the other party must have medicine or medical pods that could help him heal his damned broken leg. As long as his broken leg could recover, Ji Yuhan was confident that he could walk all the way to Yuzhong City without any obstacles. However, the sword maiden hid in the grass and did not move. This let Gu Han know that she might not want to save him. This made Gu Han a little puzzled. This was the area between Yangjing City and Yuzhong City. It was an area where human forces were the weakest. There were many Yuan Ku here, and their levels were also very high. Logically speaking, the sword-bearers who could venture into this area should be at least at the level of precious swords or famed swords. These 3 ghost-level Yuan bandits were just small monsters that they could easily get rid of. Why were they hesitating for so long? Just as Gu Han was considering whether or not he should hurry up and finish off these half-beastmen, the sound of running came from afar. This made Gu Han let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that these sword-bearers still had some humanity and courage, coming to save an unlucky fellow like him. Sure enough, 6 sword maidens came out of the bushes one after another and surrounded the half-beastmen. 4 ancient sword-rank sword maidens and 2 sword-rank sword maidens. This is still a little weak. Gu Han looked at the levels of the sword maidens that came to save him and finally understood why the sword-bearers were hesitating. This team of sword-bearers was actually made up of 4 ancient sword-rank and 2 sword-rank sword maidens. But such a team of sword-bearers should not have appeared in such a dangerous area. This was too strange. "Comrade, hold on," the tallest of the 6 sword maidens said. Gu Han recognized this sword maiden. This sword maiden was the mountain-suppressing sword of a treasured sword-rank sword maiden. However, the original mountain-suppressing sword was currently in Song Hammer's hands, so the mountain-suppressing sword that had appeared was clearly a man-made sword maiden. When the 3 half-beastmen saw the new sword maiden appear, they immediately gave up on surrounding Gu Han and charged at the new sword maiden. 2 of the sword rank sword maidens immediately blocked one of the half-beastmen, while the other 4 sword rank sword maidens worked together to attack the remaining half-beastman. These 3 half-beastmen had actually been hit in many of their vital spots by Guhan, and they had lost a lot of their stamina and blood. As such, dealing with them was much easier than the sword maidens had imagined. In less than 5 minutes, the half-beastman that had been surrounded by the 4 ancient sword rank sword maidens screamed and died on the ground. A dimensional vortex then appeared. The 4 ancient sword rank sword maidens immediately stuck their sword hilts into the dimensional vortex. After absorbing the sword essence in the vortex, they could help the other 2 sword rank sword maidens fight and quickly finish off the remaining half-beastmen. And the dimensional vortex left behind by the 2 half-beastmen naturally belonged to the 2 sword rank sword maidens. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.